Hello, my fellow Westorians. Welcome back to the Monday spoiler-free reviews for House of the Dragon. This will be episode 4. Every Monday at 6, we do these live streams, spoiler-free, as I said. Saturdays at 3, we have spoiler versions where we also look ahead and talk about what we missed or what we couldn't discuss because of said spoilers. Yeah. Make sure as well to watch our synopsis videos before each live stream, if you can. Sometimes the synopsis video is available right before, right after, right around, but the audio version is usually going to be up a few hours ahead. That will help prepare you for the week of discussions that you're likely to have, because you're like us. You're really into this stuff. Sean, pretty good episode, huh?
Yes, it was outstanding. I was maybe, if I'm going to complain, a little gratuitous on the nudity. The sexuality, I don't even think was particularly gratuitous because I think they needed to make a particular point.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of the women could have had a little more clothes on, you know. But maybe that's a lot of people probably.
I had zero complaints about it for that.
Yeah.
On that front.
It's a nitpick complaint, and it's not unique to Game of Thrones, really.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to be too
What's
negative
funny
about it. Especially because my main point is that it might be my favorite episode. Like, it's really, really awesome.
It's almost like some of the same complaints that people would have with action, but this is a different style of action, right? Like both a different way of showing sexuality and a different way of filming it. And yeah, so we'll get into that.
I think I'd rather have too much gratuitous sex and nudity than too much gratuitous violence and killing.
Sure.
So, you know, like if one thing is going to be part of the world, I'd rather it be sex and nudity than violence and death. You know?
Yeah, the two combined are where it really goes too far, and they said they won't do much of that, and so far they've held to that, so that's good. So shout out to a couple of our lovely patrons who have been keeping the lights on over here, helping us do what we do. Jeff Gnarly, the Long Snapper, History of Westeros, his first sword. And Dragon Lord Eric, the Evening Shade, Lord of the Groves and Defender of Stygi, Rider of Exodes Scapularis, the Bloodthirsty, a dragon with purple scales, wings with a red underside, black horns, and green eyes. As you can see here, art by Ed Shear, a.k.a. Cheese and Pencils. Also a super chat from Lynette Carter says, Ryan really spoiled us with this week's episode. So tea-worthy. Love what you do, so keep it up. Yeah, Ryan did spoil us. There was so much lore, so much great dialogue. Of course, it's not just Ryan, but the whole squad. But he told us some of this was coming in the interview. And yeah, it was great. A really intense episode, I guess we could say, despite the mostly the lack of violence. There was some, of course. It just has so much sprawl, even with a small cast of characters, because it doesn't treat us like we can't keep up. We're getting off-screen mentions, one-liners, things that really matter. They're important plot points summarized in just a couple of lines of dialogue and not portrayed directly, but we keep up with it. I mean, that's part of what we're here to do. I think most of the audience doesn't need to have a lot of this stuff deeply explained. I think you guys get it when they mention Aenar the Exile. You know who that is, or most of you do. And if you don't, well, you come in and you ask the question. Sean doesn't, but unsullied folk are a little less likely to know who that is. By the way, Sean, did you catch that mention when they were like, when I think it was Allison was like, you could be sullied, you know?
Oh, yes.
I thought of you. Yeah. Yep.
If I find out who Aenar is, will I be sullied?
No, Aenar's the one. You've heard the name before. Aenar's the one that led the Targaryens away from Valyria to move to Dragonstone because his daughter has the dream.
The Targaryens came from Valyria to Dragonstone, to Westeros, but then like generations later, they conquered Westeros. Right?
About 100 years later. Yeah.
Moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aenar is Aegon's great grandfather, if I remember right, or maybe one more great. So around that.
It's probably hard to tell who came before him, huh?
Exactly. That was a really funny reference. Yeah, they had we don't know who comes before Aenar, and Viserys was like, before the Aenar owned the dagger, it's difficult to know. Like, yep, that's true. We don't know either, Viserys. I was kind of hoping he would name a name there. I'd be like, oh, but it was fitting that he didn't. So,
you know, I also want to follow up on that super chat earlier. Tea-worthy. I hadn't. That's a good phrase. I like that. I think this episode, like, I like an episode that's there's only so much to gossip about when like someone runs for a battlefield. Okay, hey, what did you see him with his sword? Yeah, he had a sword. Okay, and they won the battle. Okay, well, all right. There's nothing else to talk about now. But an episode like this is so full of stuff to talk about, so full of like motivations to ponder, to interactions, to think about how they play out or could have, should have played out, what's going to happen next, why people are doing things they did. I love this episode.
That really reflects in our synopsis episodes as well, because the first 3 were all around 9 minutes, and this one was about 15, or a little over 15. So it was just, it was rich. You're right. So much to describe. There's no action to just kind of describe in 1 or 2 lines. But yeah, really, really awesome. I agree. And the reaction everywhere else seems to be equally strong. People are loving this episode. Y'all weigh in the chat as well what you think. Join the discussion on Facebook and Discord as well if you're not here live. We do our Facebook polls about who the standout performer was. Last week, the Facebook group chose Patty Considine at 40%, Matt Smith 27%, and Millie Alcock 12% for episode 3. Millie Alcock getting 3rd place. It's her lowest finish so far. She just keeps doing so well. And I imagine she's going to be in the mix again when we do our 3x3, which is right now. I'll start. Highlight performance for me. I'm going to say Emily Carrigan. It's the second time I picked her. I just am drawn to her performance, her like walking the line of not playing both sides and manipulating both sides, but trying to help both sides or all sides. She's the glue within her family. And this time we actually see her get upset and see where her boundaries are and see her push back a bit. But also shout out to Rhys Ifans. I thought he was fantastic too. He's a lot more cunning and a little dirtier. But I was just really moved. I still felt kind of sorry for him. You know, I still felt like he was in a tough spot.
Is that Otto? Is that the actor who plays Otto?
Yeah, which is like, I'm feeling sorry for Otto. Good job, actor. Good job, Rhys. That made me realize, wow, that means he's doing a great job. So I'll give him that shout out. What about you, Shea?
I'm just gonna phone it in and say Millie Alcock again. I really tried to say someone else, but I really thought she did a really good job here again. I'm not gonna pretend someone else is my favorite performance of the episode when it was her.
Ride that Millie train.
Yeah, what about you, Sean?
Can't argue, man.
Sean likes to leave our documents empty. He doesn't write in his answer for these, so I'm truly left like, what is it? What's it gonna be, Sean?
I think I'm going to pick Millie Alcock again here, though. I think this is the closest. It's the first time I've been considering a third person, the actress that played Allison. Yeah. I think this is the most range she got. But it's also it's just tough competition, right? Like, however great she does, I still think Millie Alcock is doing a little bit better. Patty Considine, last episode, I picked him over Millie Alcock, but this time, again, he did maybe even better than last time, but I think Millie Alcock came back and did a little bit better this time. Just that moment when Allison is confronting her and she's like processing, okay, she knows these are vile accusations. That was a really subtle, perfectly played moment on Millie Alcock. So that was maybe the highlight one, but there's a bunch of others too. So
right on.
I'm still picking her.
Cool. So highlight plot / scene. I'm going to go with, this is really tough. It's hard to pick one. I'm going to go with the scene where it's actually funny because I'm not calling this the dragon moment and there's very little true dragon moments in this. We have to go a little metaphorical with that, where Damon buzzes the ship, because I'm really enamored with these kind of tongue-in-cheek, straightforward, yet you could easily miss it, foreshadowing moments. I just tweeted about this right before the episode started. I loved the take a page from Nynaere's book when she tore the page out, and this was him rocking the boat. And the waves, the ripple effect, the waves really explain a lot of what happens in this episode, a lot of unintended consequences. For example, Millie hits her head, or Rhaenyra hits her head on the railing, and then Kristen Cole takes her in hand, which is really kind of setting up the way the rest of the episode goes. Damon does something to make a statement, to be provocative, and ends up having an unintended consequence of, she ends up in his arms instead. So very subtle, yet once you look at it, it's arguably not subtle. So it's kind of that subtle, not subtle, and I really love that combo of heavy, not heavy, like Led Zeppelin or Iron Butterfly.
Well, the type of thing that you don't catch at first, but when you do catch, like, oh, it's so obvious. That's
exactly
what I would call that moment. Yeah.
Ashia, what about you?
Well, I think anyone who follows me on Twitter knows my answer.
Look at that dude.
It's Samwell Blackwood. This is Bloody Ben's father from the iconic House Blackwood, and that was my highlight. Just seeing the infamous Blackwood Bracken duel right here. It was just all of that. He was great.
That was a real treat for longtime book readers, wasn't it? Even though it was pretty bloody there at the end. Did you notice, by the way, that he started heaving after he killed the Bracken? He started choking, like he was upset with himself, like he couldn't believe what he just did, which I found very, very like believable.
Yeah, he looks like he's like 14 years old, so he probably has not killed a man before.
Yeah, and he was furious and angry. It was like the anger of his family behind all that, and then he just becomes an individual again and realizes what he's done, and it's like, whoa. And you can figure there will be consequences, probably. I mean, this is the Bracken Blackwood rivalry doesn't just stop here. Sean, what about you?
Well, my first instinct, the one I wanted to be my favorite moment, the show just didn't go. I mean, if you don't have people making mistakes, there's not going to be as much plot, right? But when Damon comes back, Rita could tell you, I was saying out loud, I was like, just hug him. Just hug him. What are you waiting for? When Damon and Viserys are kind of at court, it's real contentious. It's like, it seems like this is the moment of reconciliation that you need. Like, and they hug. It's like, oh, everything's going to be okay. or not.
It was a real brief respite, wasn't it?
Yeah, one night.
It was like one.
So given that moment was spoiled, and I feel like I can't pick it at least for the reasons I wanted to originally, my secondary moment was another kind of revealing moment that makes you think about things in a different way that I didn't realize that till the second time I watched it. Before Otto goes in to tell Viserys about Rhaenyra, they have a moment. There's a scene when he's kind of like collecting himself.
Yeah.
He's grimaced and he's taking a breath and I it's hard to really know, but my impression the first time around was much like Viserys and Rhaenyra is that Otto was kind of playing them, but and not that he isn't, but there's more to it than that. Where they wouldn't have shown us the scene. They showed us the scene for a reason. He really did feel bad about what he was bringing to the king, about the impact this would have on the realm. He maybe could have brought it to the king in a different way, right? He could have brought it to him with like, we got to find a way to cover this up, not you have to find a way to deal with this now. Or, he didn't necessarily handle it correctly. But my point is that I realized from that little moment they gave us of Otto before he went in there that he is conflicted. And it's not as simple as he's connivingly ambitious.
Yeah.
There's more to it.
He's not rubbing his fingers together like, here's my chance. Here's another opportunity for my grandson. Yes. No, you're right. Like that was not the look of a man who sees an opportunity. That is a man who is very uncomfortable with what he's about to have to do, which shows that he's got
Littlefinger.
He's not
in
seizing
that moment,
the opportunity, though.
Yeah, he did seize the opportunity, but he wasn't like giddy or like, he
was uncomfortable with it, and I think he also was aware that it could backfire on him. So there was a little bit of, so I think there was a little bit of that in his unease. Yeah. Like, I don't know that it was just, I feel so bad about telling my friend Viserys. I think he's like, I'm telling him something that could get me killed. Like realistically, I think he had some.
It's a don't kill the messenger moment. He's the messenger. It's he's not going to get beaten with a helmet like Damon did to that other guy, but it is maybe a similar sort of trepidation where he's like, I don't want to be the man to do this. I wish someone else could deliver this news.
And he is his friend. They've known each other a long time. Viserys even said, like, you taught me to be king. Even Viserys was torn, too.
I mean, it seems like they're more than friends. I mean, that makes it sound wrong. But no, it does seem like he's a little bit of a paternal father figure to him. Like, again, he talks about, you taught me how to be a king. And here we are every episode talking about what a mediocre king Viserys is.
That's really funny. Yeah, Viserys, it was really meaningful because Viserys is all... He wanted to hear that, and he realized upon the way that scene played out, he's like, this is why I can't trust you anymore. Because, I hear you. I see the compassion. I hear what you're saying. But I can't fully get around that some of this might be your ambition. And I need for that not to be here. I need for that to be expunged from the situation. And the only way to do that is by expunging you. There's no separating your family loyalty from the situation. It's impossible. And that's very human. Like this show, that's a very human conflict of interest. Like really well done.
Also, even if there wasn't a conflict of interest, right? Even if someone Viserys could know that Otto was magically unbiased, right? Yeah. He also said, look, perception matters as much as the truth, right? I'm realizing this. Do you think no one else is going to realize this? So that's also a factor. And I think that Viserys maybe just like Otto maybe could have handled it better, right?
Yeah,
maybe several of these things that like he could have presented in a different way, if nothing else.
Taking different actions prior to all this would have been a lot of it. Yeah.
Yes, right. Like I think if Otto had come to him and say, hey, look, Rhaenyra got herself in trouble. We got to find a way to cover this up, right? And like if that had been his approach,
if he'd approached it differently, yeah, that's a good point.
Same thing. Viserys maybe could approach this with Otto differently. He did it in a way that Otto's going to feel slighted, and maybe there's.
His first reaction was to not believe it. He's like, "Who made this rumor up? You've been lied to." Like he definitely didn't accept it at first, which is part of what Otto was probably worried about. Yeah, he kind of saw that coming.
Anyway, all right, we'll probably talk about this more through the episode.
We have a super chat that addresses this, so let's bring that up real quick from Connor Cunningham. It's disappointing we're losing some of these actors. Did Viserys imply Otto's involvement in his father's death? Thoughts on the truth in that? And welcome to the screen, House Blackwood. So, do you think that Viserys really was getting in his cups there, thinking about it, or do you think he kind of just like had to put it on something? Like he kind of was trying to justify what his decision was, or do you think he actually, in some part of him, thinks maybe Otto killed my dad?
I don't think that, because the type of, maybe that's just because of what I know about I looked up what a burst belly was. We talked about this a few months ago. And maybe that's just my perception of it, that it doesn't seem like it could be poison. But that doesn't mean Viserys knows that. Viserys doesn't necessarily have the same medical information we do. But how would Otto have known he was going to get chosen? That's the other thing. He points out, he's like, you were just one man out of many at my grandfather's court. You went from just a rando at court to the second most powerful man. There's no way I think Otto could have known he would have been chosen for that. I think that's maybe the part that that puts a big dent in the idea. Along with the idea that I really don't think Balon was poisoned.
Unless he was doing some other manipulating in the background, which is what Viserys is starting to wonder about now.
Yes,
like what else did you do in those 5 days leading up to those
I think
5
that
days,
shows he's suspicious, and that's the suspicions that he does when he's like, I'm suspicious of this. Maybe I don't have a good reason to be suspicious, but that just goes to show that I can't trust you, Norm. I'm rethinking.
The fact that I even consider this line means that I probably shouldn't have you making decisions.
It's like he's rethinking their whole life together, and like, well, what else? What are these other? Did you manipulate me here? And then that stems from having Allison sent to him when he's weak. That one he's sure of, and Otto can't deny that one. That one is true. Like we all called it at the time. We didn't call that Viserys would realize that in retrospect, and then that would have consequences for Otto. But it makes sense that is what happened. Viserys figured it out, and in thinking all this through, and it was a really good thing to seize on. Like, this is proof that Otto has manipulated me at least once, and now what about all these other times? Yeah.
So did someone say this episode was tea-worthy?
Yep, it is tea-worthy. So, dragon moment. I already mentioned the one dragon moment, which was really more about Damon than Caraxes. And there wasn't a lot of dragon stuff directly. So I'm going with dragon lore, like I said. Shout out to the huge number of Targaryen name drops in this one. Aenar, Aegon the First, Jaehaerys and Alicent. A bunch of the daughters were mentioned, not by name, but pretty much all the daughters were mentioned. And they had a lot of daughters. Was it 6 daughters? 5 daughters? A lot of daughters. And Alyssa was the one most referred to, because that's the mother, the one that Viserys is like, oh, Mom always liked you best. That was pretty funny. That one moment, that one happy moment they're sharing when Viserys seems drunk. And then talking about Balon, the father, in that scene with Otto. So that was a lot of Targaryen name drops there. And of course, there was other family mentions too, Blackwood and Bracken and Velaryon.
By the way,
like that.
If it doesn't get worked in somewhere else in our episode, I want to talk about that scene. So
cool.
We'll get back to it.
Nice. Yeah. At the end, in fact, I've got that set up. And Shay, what about you?
Since there weren't a lot of actual dragon moments, I'll have to go with the fire dragon that they used to great effect to light the very dark King's Landing nighttime scenes, which was one I appreciated because it had a lot of foreshadowing, a lot of symbolism, a lot of that. But just in terms of a technical level, they were talking about how they really wanted it to be lit only by 3 things: sun, moon, or flame. And so this was a great way for them to have flame lighting them, and like the waves passing over her face, and just it worked really well, like the breathing element of it. On a
made it seem more like a festival too. The way it was, like,
absolutely.
In and out, the lighting was. Yeah, it's like stone dragons breathing fire. It's a little bit metaphorical to some of the prophecies as well, and it's just a reference to something that Lady Gwyn pointed out on Saturday. She actually predicted this somewhat, that there would be robust fire displays, in part because of what's expressed in A Song of Ice and Fire, particularly when Dany goes to Karth and there's fire mages, and Quaithe is like, before your dragons were reborn, this fire mage could barely get flint out of obsidian or get sparks out of obsidian. Now there's just, the fire magic is working a lot better. So in this era, with dragons all around, you might think little minor fire magic would work a little better. And you see, like, at one point there's a guy with flaming hands and there's little people doing fire tricks. It's like, yeah, so that really fit in really well. So Lady Gwyn, good prediction there. Sean, what about you?
Muted.
I also really love that moment at the beginning. You already talked about the idea that Damon's recklessness hurt Rhaenyra, and she falls into Kriston's arms. But there's another. I don't know if you mentioned foreshadowing. I'm almost scared to get reactions to this. When they're going through the adventure of the city, and that blind woman, some sort of street seer or whatever, she's like, "Oh, would you like to know your death, child?" And that moment's interrupted by a dragon breathing fire. I don't know what they're trying to tell us there.
No comment. Yep. Good catch there. Yeah, we noticed that too. But yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about that more on Saturday's stream. But Sean, good catch. Okay, so some themes and patterns to set up the rest of the episode to help frame our discussions, as we often. This is our second task each episode, as it's been working out. Family, probably biggest of all. Family stuff. So many Targaryens, as we already mentioned, not to mention Baratheon and Velaryon are technically family of a sort. They're intermarried, right? Blackwood and Bracken. Dondarrion and Blackwood as well. It's very sneaky that the two most prominent suitors, of old man and a young boy, both those houses do eventually marry into House Targaryen. Jenna Dondarrion marries Baelor Breakspear, and Black Betha Blackwood marries Aegon the Fifth. So they do get there eventually. I go into greater detail in the synopsis. It's kind of backwards. I go into greater detail in the synopsis than in the full explanation. But hey, don't need to do it twice. There's also lots of lies, omissions, and secrets, hidden agendas, hidden passages, hidden identities, hidden goals. Yeah, all sorts of stuff like that. And plans backfiring. Daemon's seduction of Rhaenyra backfires. Instead of getting a wife, he gets himself kicked out again, and it hurts everyone in the process. Daemon's treatment of Mazaria kind of backfires. She spies on him. She also helps him a little bit, but she spies on him. Rhaenyra loses the ability to choose her own husband. That's part of the backfiring of her going out and having a little party time. Otto's spying backfires. Just the very act of spying on the princess makes it look like he's jockeying for position, and he's fueling his own ambitions. Gets him kicked out. Allison arguing for Daemon's banishment is part of what leads to her father getting kicked out, so that backfires. There's the short, brutal moment like the Bracken guy taunting the Black. That obviously backfired. It's about as straightforward as you get there. And, of course, Blackwood killing Bracken might backfire on him, too, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Not to mention, which brings us to things that have yet to backfire that probably will later, some of which we'll talk about on Saturday. Do you guys think I missed anything there? There's so many little things that you could say are evidences of backfiring. Kristen Cole, his things backfired for him, like trying to be a Kingsguard. Now he's compromised. And yeah, so any other come to mind right here, or you can certainly drop them throughout the episode. Feel free to weigh in, chat, if you noticed any others.
I do want to point out that it might just be happening more in this episode, but it might be coming more to the forefront, because I feel like there have been a few backfire plans already in the past couple episodes.
Yeah, probably.
And as another thing I noticed in this episode is I feel like, and again, I don't know if it's actually new to this episode or if I'm just now keying in on it, but I feel like they were featuring the servants around the keep a little bit more. And I wonder if that's maybe in conjunction with Otto is spying. I wonder if it were getting us to realize the potential for spying and how rare these people around her. Remember, Allison sent the servants out when she wanted to talk to the king privately.
And she did a little spying, not on purpose, but she ended up like, I'm overhearing a conversation I'm not supposed to overhear.
Viserys doesn't know that
her father didn't.
Otto doesn't know that she overheard that.
Yeah.
And there was another moment that I found interesting because, again, I tried real hard to think about everything they show us. Why are they showing us? There's a scene, it was kind of overhead shot. It starts with the servants like lighting candles and then dispersing off in different directions. And even wonder if there was like 7 of them. There was like 9 of them. 7 might have been meaningful in some way, but I don't know exactly what it meant, other than it seems to me they're featuring the servants in general for some reasons.
Right on. Well said. Okay, the first scene is at Storm's End. That is the, well, at least we think it's at Storm's End. It certainly seems to be that way. We'll call it the Storm's End Cattle Show in honor of the Maiden's Day Cattle Show, which is something that happens after the Dance of the Dragons. There's a similar scenario where a young royal has a whole bunch of people arrayed to choose from. The genders are reversed in that one, but it's somewhat similar in that it's a real schlock, and the person who's being presented all these people is really not having it, really not interested in this process. So that's fast forwarding there.
Someone on Twitter called this the medieval Tinder.
Yeah, it is. Next. Medieval Tinder or Bachelorette, Game of Thrones. Yeah. So it continues the pattern of no one really being good enough. And while maybe is a little back and forth, she could maybe be a little nicer about it, but she's not wrong. Like this 70-year-old man coming up and being like, I'm a husband for you. She's like, this is gross. This is not seemly. He's like, you could be nicer. He's like, yeah, but he shouldn't be standing there in the first place. And like, good point. Like, yeah, he really shouldn't be. Like this is inappropriate. Yeah, like you shouldn't have bothered. You're wasting everyone's time, dude. The young boy is.
He should probably go to a brothel and make out with his niece. That wouldn't be as unseemly. That's what he should do.
Yeah, that's the Westerosi way. If he wants to be like a royal in this realm. The young boy, not a great choice either, especially given a big part of the point is she's looking for someone who can defend her. Now, this guy does show he's more skilled with the sword than we may have thought. But again, he starts heaving as soon as he's done with it. So it's like, yeah, this guy maybe needs a little more seasoning before he should be considered for marrying at the top here. So that was Gerald Bracken.
And I have a correction for us that I tweeted a bunch about this Samwell Blackwood yesterday because while in canon, Samwell Blackwood fights an Amos Bracken for Rhaenyra's hand. And in fact, they have changed this to the invented Willem Blackwood.
Okay.
So this is Willem Blackwood fighting Gerald Bracken, 2 invented names. But that raises the question, of course, is Willem Samwell Blackwood's brother and thus Bloody Ben's uncle, or is this a replacement for Sam Blackwood and now Ben's father is Willem Blackwood? We'll have to continue watching to find out, but that is the correction for y'all. Obviously, they have said they don't really want to be changing names willy-nilly, so we'll see if they change the name or if they just said it makes sense that there's a couple uncles here. Like,
yeah, and there would be.
Yeah. Like Sam had a sister, Black Allie, so if he could have also had a brother, Willem Blackwood. So it remains to be seen.
Yeah, and like you said as well, the book canon version, the Bracken wins the duel.
Yeah.
And there's no mention of anyone dying. So this is...
It's already changed.
So this was either changed or something in addition to that, perhaps, or... Yeah,
they're just having all sorts of duels all over the place. There was also the Sam Amos duel. That's what we'll tell ourselves.
I mean, you can't say the Brackens and Blackwoods have too many duels. Like, yeah, it fits to have as many as you want. Go ahead.
Another piece of this opening sequence that through the course of the episode, I feel like Rhaenyra makes several mistakes. Takes several disappointing actions at least.
No doubt.
And maybe it's understandable for a teenager to not have her life and relationships and emotions all figured out. But in the same way, we wouldn't judge this young boy for, maybe he's not ready to be the king. Well, maybe Rhaenyra's not ready to be the queen either.
Yeah.
And among the things about her actions that irked me a little bit through this episode was she seemed to like the Bracken guy. She seemed to like this disrespectful, snide guy on the sidelines. She was like, I could get to like him. I was like, I don't know. I don't like who she's attracted to. I don't know if she's making the best decisions.
I mean, she's already into Damon. We already saw that. So, yeah, it's already like being attracted to the bad boy kind of thing. It really reminded me of The Simpsons when Mr. Burns is choosing an heir and he didn't like the singing kid, and Nelson comes up and beats up. He's like, "Oh yes, extra point for the bully." Yeah, he's voting for the bully.
That was right here. I need to grab a screenshot of Mr. Burns saying extra points for the bully and put that for Gerald Bracken, because they literally described him in the behind the scenes as a bully.
As Mr. Burns would have voted. And Burns sounds like a Targaryen, right? Yeah. He's really old. He's just really rich. I mean, Okay, so
seems to be impervious to disease.
Indestructible. Yes, that's right. You're right. Wow, you're really making a strong case here. Okay, so so that gets cut short. Rhaenyra's like, no more of this. I'm out of here. 2 months.
He's in charge of nuclear power. Sorry, I had to get that one in.
True. The dragons are like nuclear power. You're right. Wow, this is such a strong parallel. He's a descendant, just a long lost descendant of the Targaryens. So the next section we'll call Return of the Prince. Everyone is a flutter. It's amazing how everyone's like, oh,
you gotta sing that one, though.
Return of the Prince.
Okay, good.
Return of the Prince.
Thanks.
Come again.
I'll dance.
Yeah, so do we need to do a dance as well? That's your job, Sean. You're supposed to do dance.
Yeah, I was doing it.
Okay, good. So, yeah, Damon's the Mac, and he has returned. Everyone's so hilarious. Everyone's just like, the court. Everyone, get to court. Hurry up. Get in line. Even Viserys is like waiting, like with bated breath, and they're like, it's Damon. You can hear the whispering. I love that so much. He walks in, like, he was relishing that. Like, they're all awaiting my return. Like, he took over. Like, all eyes were on him in the throne room, where all eyes were supposed to be on the king generally. Like, he really just took the spotlight away from his brother, and he knew that. He played this as much as he mishandled so many other things this episode. He played this moment perfectly. Walked in, did the politics, the diplomacy perfectly, kneels down, hands his throat. Did you, by the way, were you wary when he knelt down? Did you think it was going to be like a trick like he did at the Stepstones where he was giving up his sword? Because I know it's going to happen, but I wasn't sure if someone unsullied would be like, ooh, that's the same thing he did at the Stepstones. Pretending to kneel.
It didn't occur to me. I feel like maybe it should have occurred to me, but it didn't. So.
Cool. And
all I was thinking was just hug each other.
That's right. You did say that. Yeah. So he says that great line, add it to the chair, throws the hammer down, and and gives his crown up. It's pretty cool. Very similar to the book version of the scene. And the major difference in the book scene is that it happens at a tournament. He flies around the tourney grounds, and his dragon is there as he's submitting. So it's maybe got a little extra gravitas, but it's more tense in this version because they're much closer to each other. They're standing next to each other, like in arm's length, whereas in the book version, Viserys is like way up on a pavilion where he's, hey, brother, way down there, So, but very similar end result. He puts everyone at ease with this. The whole realm is like, the brothers are friends again. But yeah, that obviously lasts, 10 minutes of episode time. He tells Rhaenyra, I just wanted to come home, which is one of multiple lies told in front of the Heart Tree this episode, but we'll come back to that later.
He did say, if I remember right, he wanted the comforts of home.
Okay,
so
maybe that
might not have been a total lie.
The old god's looking into his heart with that one. It's real, like, do the old gods care about the letter of the wording, or are they about the spirit? I don't know. What do you think, Ashay? Is it the letter of the oath, or is it the spirit of the oath for the old gods?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, really, because like sometimes you just say something and you're unintentionally lying. Like you just like misrepresent. I think it's intention and exactly saying it. So like Rhaenyra saying Damon did not touch me, that was a lie, and she was lying in spirit. It was both there.
Was both. Yeah, you're right.
Well, she was sort of telling the truth. I agree she's being deceitful, but I do want to point out that she, at this moment, it's unfair of her to only be addressing this, but she's trying to address the idea of whether or not she's still a maiden.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But if she had just
her
said that,
didn't have sex, so
but he still touched her. That's my point. Is that she literally actually
lied
lied when she said Damon did not touch me.
She had a way to say technically the truth, but she didn't.
Yeah,
she
she
said
didn't.
no,
That's
he didn't
my
touch
point.
me, which is false. If she just said no, he didn't. we didn't have sex, that would have been true.
Yeah.
And I still think the old gods might have frowned on her being just like trying to not tell the truth in that situation, even if she didn't actually lie, which is why I said I don't think it always has to be the case. I think just being like a little bit dishonest in front of it might.
And Allison would be upset no matter what. Like her friend is deceiving her in any way you slice it.
But I also don't think it matters that much because they're Targaryens and the old gods aren't their gods, and they're not going to be going into the Rarewood network to be judged at all by them.
Maybe not.
They're just going to get burned up like that. So I don't think she's ever going to be like. I mean, like because their bodies are cremated after their death.
Yeah.
They don't get fed into like the root system. In other words,
That's
to
true,
be clear.
that's true.
So I don't think it's relevant to her.
So we have the Street of Silk. Let's go there. Actually, let's go there. Yeah, it looks like quite a place to party. No,
it's like the Amsterdam red light district kind of place.
Yeah, it really kind of is. Now this is to be paired up with the Street of Steel, which is where, say, Gendry was found in Season 8, working away on his forges. There's lots of forges on the Street of Steel. This is the Street of Stilk, so there's a few other streets of something.
I appreciated
King's Landing.
Viserys and Damon talking about their time on the Street of Silk together.
I included that in the little mini mentions that we have later. That is very relevant. You're right. So Tyrion's many journeys there are known. He eventually started sneaking there and pretending to see Alayaya as a cover to visit Shay. And there's all those secret passages that may be built by Tywin later. So those shouldn't exist at this point. But it's the same location, basically. Different venues, but same idea. The play itself, we'll start with that. There's some vibes for the Braavosi play we got in Game of Thrones. And it's more than one callback to Arya. Not just with that moment, but when Rhaenyra's like, he thought I was a boy. Which, of course, happens to Arya several times.
And later, she has sex with a Stormlander man, a dark-haired man.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Which
really,
Gendry is as well. Good point.
Definitely. Like I said, she's fully in her Arya moment.
Very true. Yeah, and she starts the episode at Storm's End as well.
Yeah.
So I guess that's setting that up too. And she was excited that
and
she was
she's
excited
rude like
when
Arya
she
too.
thought I was a boy.
Yeah.
He was like she was happy. Like it was being incognito, being not the princess was very it was very
liberating.
Yeah, it was very liberating, but only for a short time because the liberation was framed by how naive she is about what's going on, like about what Damon is trying to do. Like if she had really known what was happening, she would have been on guard. She would have maybe not have gone in the first place. So some of the naivete is feeding that feeling of liberation. It's really quite dangerous and problematic for her reputation and all that.
Yeah, I think
it's hard to say at what point, but at some point, alcohol starts to feed the liberation too, right? If he's getting her drunk,
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. They're both drunk there. I mean, to be fair, like I think like he was drunk as well.
He got way drunker after he couldn't perform, which is we'll get to that in a second. So he's watching her during the play. This is really important. He stares at her to see her reaction to the crowd booing her because he's expecting this. I don't think he set this play up, but he knew it was going to happen. He knew what they'd be talking about.
I bet he's seen this play before.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or like something like that. So
this probably isn't like the first time they've ever performed this, right? It's probably a nightly ritual.
You're right. Yeah, it's a nightly, exactly. Like
weekly at least.
Shows like that. You see like plays that they run every night for a couple of weeks. This is probably the same kind of thing. So she's meant to see that she's unpopular to reinforce the notion that she needs a powerful friend or two, which Damon intends to be himself. Like, he was like, well, if you marry me, we can address this sort of thing. I can help you handle this. Are they going to say that with me by your side? Are they going to say, boo, she's too soft with Damon, King of the Stepstones, at your side? Are they going to call you soft then?
I mean, in the play, Damon was a crybaby, so
maybe they will. But that's what he expects. Yeah.
I was going to say that none of the potential heirs, were presented in particularly positive light.
Exactly.
But we got the definitive crowd reaction about Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
We saw how the play producers were presenting Damon, but we didn't exactly see what the crowd thought of them.
Yeah, we didn't get boos or leers or any sort of reaction.
They may have also gotten
But you
booed.
can imagine, right, you can imagine that the people put on a play want to please the crowd, and if they've got him up on stage like a crybaby, the crowd probably is at least would enjoy mocking him, right?
Yes.
At least it would be fun. And Damon maybe is a little thicker skinned to not be affected by it like she was. Maybe he was at first even.
Yeah, I think he was at first.
That might even be part of what pushed him to go off and, fight a battle. He needed to go prove himself. He might have felt that more than she does if he's seen this type of public reaction before.
Yeah, and he cares about how he's seen. His pride is really important, so maybe he, understands some of this, but yeah, he also does care on some level, but mostly as to how it helps his goal, I think.
Another example of perception and truth, both being, I think actually Viserys said truth doesn't matter at all. Perception is what matters, which I don't exactly agree, but I do agree that, perception is on par with importance to truth.
Yeah. There's definitely sometimes where the truth matters more than the perception, but he's right that perception can even outlay truth. Okay, so the brothel itself, fascinating, unusual scene, directed by a woman, and we get a woman's gaze. It's a great example of why some people argue, why base the writer's room on gender or diversity? Just pick the best writers.
This is why.
Best doesn't always mean... best, the definition of best in a group includes variety. Variety and diversity are the same thing. Diversity is a subset of variety. Variety is usually applied to things, diversity to people, but it's the same thing.
Yeah,
different people film things different ways.
Yeah, I think if people couch it in the term of we need variety in writers' rooms, people would be less up in arms about it because they would be like, we don't want this monolith of opinion and experience in something that's trying to reflect the wide breadth of all of the human experience.
Right. Yeah, and if this director shot every single episode, we would get like, okay, we've seen this before. So it's not like we want all of this, but this should have been part of the original Game of Thrones. There was only 4 episodes, if I remember rightly, directed by women.
And that was early on, too.
Yeah, out of the 70-some episodes there were total, which is like, that's not even trying to be balanced, It's like, come on.
Yeah, so this is Claire Kilner, who did an amazing job. This was Claire Kilner, who did an amazing job, and she will be directing some future episodes
5
as
and
well.
9, the next one and the second to last.
Yeah, so we'll get more of her perspective, and if you watch the behind the scenes, she talked a lot about some of what she brought to the table as a director, things like, some of it doesn't have to do with what we're talking about here with the female gaze at all, but things like the Storm's End being windy. She wanted to make sure that there were fans and wind was going, so that it added this like sense of life and for the actors. So things like that are something that a director might bring to the experience for context, or speaking more specifically to the brothel scene, things like how the camera lingers. That if you're
doesn't linger.
Yeah, that's kind of where you can see the difference between the male and female gaze.
Yeah,
I honestly challenge you, go find a brothel scene in Game of Thrones and just compare just how the women are on there as objects to this, where you're just seeing people kind of just experiencing it. So having a time. Like, it just feels so much more real and sexy, really, despite it being like dark and dangerous thing that Rhaenyra is doing. The Game of Thrones one just feel kind of sleazy and gross compared to it.
Yeah, this isn't like...
This one seemed
it's like people are
more
staring.
like a celebration, and people were participating rather than it was happening to them.
Yes, exactly.
It's like what Damon's describing. He's like, this is for pleasure. You should have a good time. This isn't like, this isn't like people being exploited. This isn't people being forced. Like, some people aren't having a bad time so other people can have a good time. Everyone's having a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the lingering gaze thing is really interesting to me. I hadn't thought about that a whole lot, but it makes so much sense because that is true. Like, you ever go to like a party, it's just kind of a general difference in how, obviously there's exceptions. Not all men and women are the same like this. But men tend to be more focused on certain things. It's an old stereotype, right? Men are focused on one thing, like over-focused on one thing. And that's true for where your eyes fall as well, and where your gaze falls.
Yeah, exactly. So a scene in Game of Thrones might have started at like the bottom of the woman and followed her all the way up, so like you see her fully nude and see the tits and all that. Whereas this is just, these are people that are in this experience. Let's film what's happening and not like focus in on how sexy this person is.
The nudity is there, but it's not like, look at this. It's not the center of it. It's there. It's not the thing where the camera's centered on. Yeah. we might need some additional takes out there to hear ways this is described really well, but I think we've gotten the gist of it pretty well. Yeah, so like you said, as well as Shea earlier, that or maybe it was Sean mentioned that this was something that Viserys and Damon did when they were younger, and for them there was no consequences really. They're like, yeah, we can just do this. And Damon's either a combination of willfully ignoring the gender difference here or using that to get Rhaenyra in trouble for his own ends, and it just doesn't work the way he wants to.
I appreciated that Viserys wasn't a full hypocrite about this. We know that he went to the Street of Silk himself. When he first hears about Rhaenyra doing this, he isn't just like, oh, that's terrible, she's disinherited. He's like, oh, okay, like, fair enough.
Yeah, just the being there wasn't a problem. It was
the fact that she was hooking up with her uncle specifically, and maybe if it had been clear that she had just been fully hooking up in general, or that was known, but he wasn't just completely opposed to his daughter being in a sexual place.
Yeah, just going out drinking. He's like, well, what's the big deal there? It's like, oh, it wasn't just drinking. Oh.
But yeah, as we said, it seems that Damon, and this is something I want to have like a long chat about and get the chat's perspective on, is how much Damon wanted this knowledge to get out there. I think he wanted to get out there, but I don't think he told Mazaria to go tell Otto.
Yeah, I don't think he connected with her at all. I think that this was their first reconnection. But I totally agree with you that he wanted them. Because yeah, like you said, this is the perfect image. He's pulling her hat off.
If you didn't catch this, he takes her hat off as soon as they enter the brothel.
Yeah, and she has such distinct hair that has to be on purpose. He's like, you are going to get noticed, and so will I, because my hat's already off. So everybody knows who I am. Everybody knows who you are,
So yeah, I think that is the damning thing. I don't think that there's a setup to point to Damon having Mazaria go to Otto, but he knew that there were people watching here, and it would get out.
Yeah. He didn't know who was watching, but he knew someone would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this, but I want to back up to one other point real quick. Damon was definitely hypocritical in the earlier scene when, maybe he's pretending to not get it, but he is pretending to not get it when he's talking to Rhaenyra about like, just get married, then you can do whatever you want. She's like, you can do whatever you want, but not a woman. Once a woman gets married, she's got to pop out babies. It's different for you. And Damon either didn't get that or pretended to not get that. Yeah. So I do want to point out his hypocrisy as far as that goes.
Agreed.
I do think I was thinking about this a lot, and I realized probably like the third time I watched it, when Damon is like hungover, they even presented his vision in his like tunnel. Did you catch that?
Was
right?
Neat. When he's carrying him,
slumped on the before they were even carrying him, when he was talking to Mazaria, and she's like, "This will cut to the fog," and he just dumped it out. And he's definitely
who turns down a hangover drink? Seriously.
Yeah. So in this moment of him being drunk and tired and bewildered and dragged into court and a knife at his throat, and he rattles off this perfect plan for how to handle the inheritance and the throne. You think he came up with that then and not when he was sober ahead of time, drawing a map for Rhaenyra and providing her clothes, brought her in, took his hat off and her hat. The more I thought about it, I was like, oh, yeah, obviously he had this set up.
Yeah, you're right.
This was all like a plan.
That's a really good thing to draw attention to. Is I said, he was surprisingly eloquent for someone that just had the world's worst bender. And you nailed it, I think, is because all of that was planned. He had all his thoughts straight in his head. Yeah. He didn't have to make those words up. He had already planned to say them or something like them.
Yeah, he probably planned it to go a little differently.
He definitely didn't plan to have erectile dysfunction. That was not part of the plan.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think he planned for a spy to report it to Otto or the king or whoever, but I do think he expected word to get out.
Yeah.
Like, I think he was trying to make sure word got out.
I think, he wanted her to be a little bit sullied so that he could make his case, hey, you should just marry us to each other.
Yeah.
And he might have been happy to have gotten her pregnant right then and there. It turned out not to be able to.
Totally agree.
But say he had, would that have solidified the plan?
If she was pregnant with Damon's child,
then Viserys would have been forced to,
might
potentially.
Be like, all right, we got to hush, just do this, pretend like y'all,
like it was married.
And again, remembering back to the moment when he told her he came back for home, the comforts of home. I think he was talking about her. I think he might have had all this planned out before he even came back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think it's reasonable to think that might even be the reason he came back. He might have pieced this together. He's like, all right, I've done what I need in the stepstones. Corlys has his own agenda. I got my agenda. I'm going back to make my play for the throne.
So we now have had twice where Damon has had problems with his manhood, so to speak. The first time, it was just like an interesting thing to happen. Like, oh, wow, he's got physical stress and it's rounding out his character. I didn't really consider that it would come back around and be a plot point again. It's a really, really interesting way to... It's a really interesting attribute for such a like hyper masculine, aggressive character to have. Especially because in the behind the scenes, they say it's guilt. He knows what he's doing is wrong. And that is part of why he can't get it up. And that's very interesting that he does have some sense of what's right and wrong that he just tends to ignore, but he's ignoring something that's so strong within him that it's having a physical manifestation.
I can't help but wonder if it's even deeper than what they're letting on in the behind the scenes too, because I remember theorizing earlier on, because I felt like, if you remember, I felt like Rhaenyra was kind of taken aback when she's like, wait, she's pregnant? She seems surprised at the idea that he could have it. It made me wonder if he had confided in her that he might have some problem.
I don't think he did.
Observed it.
I don't think Damon would have confided that information in just about anyone.
But
probably not.
But it is noteworthy that
but if he did, she might be the one. You know,
it is noteworthy that Damon has a wife and has apparently been up and down the street of Silk many times and has never had a child.
Okay, and it was brought up, and aside from like 2 scenes of seeing him not being able to finish, it's come up more than once per episode. The fact that he doesn't have a kid or hasn't gotten someone pregnant or has had sex without it. I feel like they're like making a point of it in every episode in one way or another. Doesn't necessarily mean he can't have kids no matter what. But it seems to be, if that turns out to be the case, it won't be a big shocker, right? Like, oh yeah, they've been saying this the whole time, you know.
You're right. Okay, so let's take a little halfway point here. We've got a couple of questions here. Nancy Gross in the super chat says, Viserys is a good king in this episode. After the initial shock/denial with Otto, he takes charge of the marriage question as the king, leading Rhaenyra into claiming her role as heir to marry Laenor. He also acts as king to have the maester do room service tea for Rhaenyra, and he dismisses Otto despite his conflict over. She doesn't say the part about Otto. I added that. But
I want to add something here, too.
Yeah.
We also got a question from Endoman who said, Allison sent the tea, and I wanted to have a little chat about the idea of this tea, because absolutely it did cross my mind when I watched the episode and the maester brought it. He says, the king brought this for you. But I was like, well, really, anyone could have done that on behalf, literally anyone,
including just Melos himself, and claim the king sent it.
And so I was very suspicious of this. So I'd love to have a chat about this.
Okay, let's talk about the tea. I think it is a really meaningful moment because, again, it gets into choice. Again, it calls back other times where people. I'm assuming this is Tansy tea. If it's not, no big deal. Tansy tea is the same basic point, because Tansy tea came up several times in a Game of Thrones. Of course, Lysa was tricked into taking it, and so was Jane Westerling. So we have 2 different women who were forced to have abortions that did not want to have abortions, where this one, she's given the choice. Not only is she given the choice, but she's given the complete anonymity about it. Melos notably walks out of the room, doesn't say, like, you have to take this. He's like, this is from your father. This is an insurance policy, basically. And then he leaves. It's like, it's her choice, and then the audience doesn't actually see whether she takes it or not. The episode ends with her staring at it like, oh. And it's such a great conundrum because we know she didn't sleep with Damon, but she did sleep with Kristen Cole, so she has a very good reason to drink it. Doesn't mean she did, but it just provides a lot of different angles here. And
think about really the perception versus the truth. If she doesn't drink it and has a kid, I don't know where this is going, but that would be a way it could go for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Whereas, I lean towards, yes, Viserys did order this. I think that I think it's significant to Rhaenyra because it's like, oh, your father didn't really, really believe you. Like, he was willing to just sweep it under the rug for you. So I think that has greater significance to me than the idea of, like, Otto or Melos or someone trying to, like, trick Rhaenyra, you know what I mean? Like, I think that has greater significance within the story, within the plot, within the character dynamics. The idea that Viserys was still willing to stand by Rhaenyra, but he didn't really believe her when she lied to him there, or didn't believe her enough. Like, that means more to me.
And I think, and since Allison did believe her and was such a crucial part of arguing to her husband that her trust in Rhaenyra matters too, which of course backfires a bit, getting Otto fired. and of course, Rhaenyra was lying to her, and she believed the lie. So given that Alicent seems to have genuinely believed Rhaenyra, I'm not sure that she would have sent the tea.
Yeah, and I think Alicent is going to find out that she was wrong to believe Rhaenyra.
Yeah, probably.
Like she'll find out the truth about Kristen, or something will happen there
Something
to where she'll feel particularly betrayed for good reason, because she was lied to, and like Alicent put her honor, her word on the line for Rhaenyra.
And remember, she didn't just swear in front of the heart tree, which she may not have even been thinking about, but she said, "I swear on my mother's grave, he didn't touch me." That was
my mother's memory.
Sure. Yeah. So that's pretty big. It was something that Alicent would take very seriously. Alicent is a follower of rules. She believes in like homages and oaths.
She's
like
a faithful girl.
Yeah, she's a faithful girl. So she would be very disappointed by this. Like this is her first time getting angry. I think like really angry. Like she really doesn't like this behavior. Like this going out and fornicating. She's more proper, right? She look at that face. That is judging. That is judging. So that's why I like her so much as an actor. She does that so well. Like she goes from like.
It's also worth noting. I feel like they even made a point in the episode when she's off having fun in the street.
Yeah,
Alicent's there with the crying baby. Like she's taking her responsibility seriously.
Yeah, Alicent's a baby raising a baby. I mean, Alicent is cleaning an older man of his wounds.
Talk about duty. Yeah, that was such a powerful moment. Yeah, she's okay. So while Damon is saying sex is for pleasure, it's interspersed with her having sex with her husband, and it's very not pleasurable. Like, he's got all those bruises on his back. But like you said, that then she goes and like helps him bathe to make sure he's comforted, and like she's really very good so far.
And they also present her like in like behind bars, like the windows are sort of like a prison cell almost. I think they're really like playing up this difference between what her life and what Rhaenyra's is like. So I think it adds to like her frustration. It's like, look, everything I'm doing, like you have it better than me. And you're still complaining and running around and being foolish. Like, come on.
You get to choose a husband, and I didn't get to choose. Remember that? And there's that really moment when they start to have it's really nice to see their friendship come back around. Like, I didn't expect to see that happen. It makes sense that it did, though, given the circumstances. I thought it was really well done. She has that moment where she says, yeah, like, I don't want to be trapped in a castle just having kids, and Alicent's like, and Rhaenyra realizes what she said.
I can't imagine.
She's like, sorry. She like whispers sorry. Like it was a very heartfelt moment. She's like,
which is a great connection to last episode where Alicent accidentally hurts Rhaenyra's feelings by bringing up, how easy childbirth was when Rhaenyra lost her mother in childbirth. And of course, Alicent didn't clock it enough to say anything or apologize, but Rhaenyra did have that realization.
The servants noticed. They were like, okay,
I was being hopeful in that moment too, because I was right off them having hugged, Viserys and Damon having hugged, and then Rhaenyra catches herself saying something inappropriate about her life versus Alicent's, and then also realizes right after that her dad's probably mad at her coming back early too. She's kind of like self-reflecting, realizing the mistakes, confiding in Alicent about it. Like I was so hopeful with all that, but it still falls apart. But what was I going to say? I wanted to say about what were we talking about? We were talking about the idea of
Alicent and the moon tea in general.
The tea. I think that we really have to trust this Maester, Mellos. Wow. I think that the nature of the time jumps, they're kind of like moving forward through a lot of big moments, kind of getting to the biggest moment. Yeah. And so it makes sense they're not getting into the minutia of every side character. But what that means to me on a sort of a meta level is that we kind of have to trust this Maester. I assume maybe he's conniving with Otto. I even wondered for the first couple episodes if he was purposefully not treating Viserys' wounds properly or something.
Yeah,
maybe that's all still a possibility, but they haven't really gotten into it. So I just have to default right now that he is what he seems to be, which means he probably did just bring the medicine from the king. That's my default. I can imagine learning something different over time.
I could definitely see it coming from someone else, but I do think the king actually does make the most sense too.
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense. But that doesn't mean that Mellos can't be someone to have loose lips. To say, hey, I delivered, even accidentally or on purpose. If he brings that up to someone, be like, well, the fallout was that I brought her moon tea. So
I was wondering if anyone was watching them, Kristen and Rhaenyra, together, because they kept showing the camera from behind the walls, like through, as if someone was peeking in on them. And I was like, for a second, I was like, is Damon watching? Like, no, Damon is passed out drunk. He can't be watching anything. But
if some servant was, and it gets back to Allison or Otto, and it, it might not. It might have been too spoilery for them to show us someone see it at that moment.
Yeah.
But if it does come up later, once again, I think they've set the stage for it to have been known, for it to have been witnessed.
Agree.
I even said the same thing earlier. I thought that it might be an error of just, even if only lacking proactiveness. I don't know how to say it right, but like of Corlys to not realize that the king was meeting with Allison to the point that they got married. I feel like there was like the potential for networking information is there and everyone's not taking advantage of it. But I feel like now that we see Otto and maybe Mazaria also, and they're featuring these servants, the potential for people having knowledge that you wouldn't assume is greater now than it was before.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to make one more point about the king sending that tea.
Sure.
I think it is, even if he didn't trust her enough about telling the truth, that he still wanted to send the tea, it kind of makes sense. I think it's good for him to give her an out. It makes, just in general, just think about the idea, whether you're talking about like a 7-year-old kid or a 17-year-old kid or a 27-year-old adult. When you're in trouble and you realize, okay, did you do X? And you could just say, no. I'm like, oh, okay, and everything's okay. But if you say yes, you get in so much trouble. It's so easy to avoid so much trouble by just telling a lie. It makes sense that people do it, And so I think a father would understand that the trouble that his daughter's facing, she would lie about it. Of course she would lie about it.
And he didn't really ask her.
It's not so
either.
much that he doesn't trust her. Right, yeah. It's not exactly that he doesn't trust her. It's that it makes sense that someone would lie about this. And so he's giving her an out. Like, if you did lie, take this medicine. You don't have to admit it to me or the realm or whatever. But if you did, here's your out.
Yeah.
So once again, I think it makes sense for it to be him. Maybe even too wise of a play for him. Maybe someone else was advising him to do it.
Well, that's part of why Nancy Gross saying Viserys was a good king this episode. I was like, he's done a lot of bad things, but for the most part, I have to agree. Like, his decision making in isolation in this episode was good. His reactions and stuff, pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, a lot like he said, Jaehaerys would have disinherited you.
Yeah,
he was a better king than Jaehaerys in that moment.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Jaehaerys didn't handle his daughter well. Jaehaerys handled a lot of other things better than Viserys, but not his own family, I don't think. Cozy Tori sends a super chat from Canada, says, this episode felt the most female-focused, especially with the juxtapositions. What did you think of the parallel with Sir Kristen and Allison doing their duty to the crown? I didn't catch this at first, but I see what you mean.
Yeah,
both of them sort of forced to sleep with the royal that wants it, and they lightly object, but ultimately they're like, I can't really say no.
Yeah, I think this is a good time for me to go on the record and say Kristen could not consent to this. I do think that Kristen is more attracted to Rhaenyra than Allison is attracted to Viserys.
Yes.
But the power and balance here is so great. Mm-hmm. And when you rewatch it, Kristen is so clearly conflicted. He is so clearly torn up about this.
The way he stares at his cloak, he's folding it nicely, putting it down. Oh, yeah.
He would never have chosen to do this. He knew he couldn't. He just couldn't find a way to say no. I get it. I understand it. I relate to it. I just feel really bad for Kristen here. I think that his reaction long term to this could be what sours me on him. Like if he is so torn up by this that he acts out and does terrible things,
or gets a big head. Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? But my point is that at this moment, I just feel really bad for Kristen, and I don't really blame Rhaenyra because I don't think she realizes that she has such power over him. Like, she just doesn't realize that. She's like, oh, cute boy. I'm all turned on from going out with my uncle.
And Damon was just like showing her all this wanton, like, do what you want, have sex for pleasure, all this Damon, other stuff,
Yeah, that's what she has to go off of, is her uncle taking her to a brothel to have his way with her. She's like, of course she's gonna go back and take that message to heart, but no, it doesn't excuse it. And so as much as I don't think Rhaenyra is terrible for doing this, but I don't think it's a laudable thing or like a you go girl thing. Like, it was a messed up thing that she did.
I think that it's more okay. It's more understandable for the teenager to make this sort of mistake than I don't know how Damon's got to be 35.
Yeah, Damon.
40,
yeah, but Kristen is young too. I would also like to know.
Right,
Kristen is maybe max 25, maybe more like 22, but he's only he's a young kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my default is I agree with you, and I think it would be more apparent to audiences if the genders were swapped.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Everyone would be like, "Whoa,
Absolutely.
you shouldn't do this to her."
Yeah,
but
and you appreciate that. It's like you're showing these power dynamics are not entirely based on gender. They obviously are a lot of times, but it's mostly about power.
I will say that again, it took a third watch, but I started to wonder if they were trying to demonstrate that Kristen was okay with this in the end, because they took a lot of time showing him like take her boots off and they're kind of giggling together. And he still was pressured into it from the beginning, but he seemed okay with it by the end. But maybe I don't know.
But not afterwards.
Anyway,
he couldn't look her in the eye.
Yeah.
He couldn't look her in the eye afterwards.
Yeah, right. He felt awkward.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like, he is attracted to her. But that's not enough for him to have really consented and to be fully in this and to not be racked with guilt to a point that I mean, like, this is like this could get him killed.
Yeah,
this
not
could
just guilt,
ruin his
fear.
life.
Yeah, this is execution worthy.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, my honor. It's like, oh, my life.
So let's
could
tie
not doing it gotten him killed.
Yes,
like,
it could have.
Would turn on him?
He doesn't know that.
He knows her pretty well. Though.
He knows her pretty well. I think he probably could have been safe to know, like, I'm not gonna do that, and like if I say no, she's not gonna order my execution. But he might think that she's like capricious, or it would be embarrassed enough that she might get him like sent to the wall for impropriety. Like she might.
He did touch me. Yeah,
he does. Like he might. He doesn't know that well. Like I think that he might be smart enough to realize, oh, like she's a royal princess. Things are different for them. I can't rest easy.
Yeah, and as well, I'd say that there's a history going on here that I put this in the synopsis, but I'll explain it here as well. The guy that Kristen Cole replaced was Ryan Redwine. He was really, really on the up and up, like one of the most dominant and virtuous Kingsguard that had been around. Remember this guy, the guy that died that Cole took his place. So Westerling is now Lord Commander in his place. But during Redwine's regime as Lord Commander, during his run, he discovered one of the Kingsguard had 3 wives and 16 children. That was Lucamore the Lusty. Lucamore Strong, by the way. So from that family, from the Strong family, and unknown relation to Lionel and Harwin directly. Well, Lionel's the one who matters, the Master of Laws. But he was discovered, gelded, sent to the wall. So and Kristen took Ryan's place, the guy that like was virtuous and exposed this guy and did the right thing based on the Kingsguard rules. So if Kristen Cole grew up in the shadow of Ryan Redwine being like the Barristan Selmy of this time, so he's another thing that he's going to be conflicted about is he is not living up to the ideals of a Kingsguard or a true knight over the people that he grew up to idolize, presumably, or at least other boys his age would have been idolizing.
A quick question, by the way. Do you guys think that Damon and Harwin recognize each other in the streets?
No. I think for sure. I think Harwin recognized Damon.
Yeah, Harwin knew who Damon was. But Damon doesn't know who Harwin is because Harwin wasn't on the Gold Cloaks when they were formed. He was added afterwards. So
assuming
Damon's
that's the same in show canon, I guess. I have to always couch things that, like, that's the case in the books, but technically it could be different.
Damon's been gone for years, and before that that guy might not have been in his radar anyway.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
But yes, Harwin is now a captain in the Gold Cloaks, but not the commander or anything.
Regardless, it was another moment, like they showed us that on purpose. Is he a witness to Rhaenyra having been out with Daemon? Is that,
yes, but it doesn't matter because they found out anyway. Yeah, that's why it's interesting because either way they found out. Like there's nothing he found out. There's nothing he found out that no one else knows.
But I think it matters because not everyone knows, but Harwin himself knows, and Harwin
he knows personally. It's not gossip.
He knows exactly what happened.
Yeah, so it's very relevant in that sense, especially when you consider that Harwin is the son of Lionel Strong and the brother of Larys. Like he's got family members that maybe Harwin is no snitch at all, and he doesn't say a damn thing to anyone. But maybe he brings it up to his dad or something, potentially. Like they might share information.
So that is definitely something to think about for later.
Maybe just a reminder also that like they're being noticed, like they're not gonna get away with this, if you will.
Sure.
You know?
So speaking of tea, Terra Incognita wants to know what you're drinking, Sean.
Oh, this is the V8 blueberry something, some kind of blueberry flavored V8 with mango Mountain Dew and raspberry sparkling ice.
All right.
That's great.
That's an interesting combo today.
There was a funny moment as well. Lafrenic says, even if no one was in the room with them to see Kristen's absence from his post would raise suspicion. Yeah, if anyone had come by and been like, hey, where's Kristen? But but I guess that just didn't happen. And as well, that was pretty funny though, when she returns to the room and he's like, how did you?
Yeah, what?
How did
I thought
Are you
so?
okay?
So he now knows there's secret passageways.
Yes, that's true.
I don't know how relevant that is, but he's now aware that there's a way into her room and a way out of her room from within. So that
Although apparently she couldn't find her way to get back in her room that way.
Yeah,
That was my thought when she left, because I was like, is she just gonna leave it open? How does she get back in?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, she's just gonna walk
goes through
through
the
the front
front.
door. But I didn't expect that, I suppose.
you know, something just occurred to me. Is when I assume this knowledge is going to spread somewhat about her and her brother in the brothel.
Her uncle.
Kristan, her uncle. Kristan's going to piece together. That must have been when it was. That must be how she got there.
Oh, yeah.
And other people might not believe it, but Kristen's gonna be like, well, I know that she was out that night and she
Good
came
point.
back and wanted to sleep with me, and maybe she tasted like alcohol on her breath, or like, whatever other things that, like, it was pretty damning for him. And again, we know Rhaenyra did not have sex with Damon, but Kristen might literally think, oh, Rhaenyra had sex with someone else and then came and had sex with me right after that.
Yeah.
Like, he might not believe her for good reason.
Yeah.
Like, it
Who
makes
knows
sense.
how he'd react to that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or he might find out the only reason she slept with him was because Damon wouldn't.
Yeah.
It could go that way too. So there's a couple different ways for that to go. We'll have to wait and see. All right, let's talk about Allison and Viserys, them talking together. We've already discussed her uncomfortability and her duty and how she shines with being a wife. The baby, by the way, is Helena. That wasn't stated, but that is her name. She's the
looks like a little girl baby.
Does look like a little girl.
Like, as much as
Aw.
babies do, but it's cute. I just like, they really did a good job of casting a very large baby.
That is a big face
because,
baby.
like, the
That's a
baby
cute
looks
kid.
so big next to Allison. It really emphasized when I was watching that, like, this is a baby raising a baby. Like, I mean, you see Rhaenyra go out as, like, she's just a young girl, and, like, that's the boat that Allison should have been in, and instead she's on her second child.
Yeah.
And it's her
Possibly
life.
another one on the way. They've
Yeah,
seen
I'm
her
like,
having, he
again,
obviously wants to make another child.
Kristen says it to Rhaenyra that many people would do anything to be in her shoes.
Yeah.
And that's true for Allison still, but I wouldn't want to be in her shoes
Yeah.
if I lived in the world.
Yeah, me neither. I'd take my chances elsewhere.
Yeah, I would rather be in Mazaria's shoes than Allison's. You know, like she has more freedoms, even if things are dangerous for her.
So that is super interesting. I love how Allison is able to help Viserys see things clearly, even though she's wrong about Rhaenyra, given she was lied to and believed her. But I like the way they worked through all that, and how she, just like she did with the Stepstone situation, and how helping his brother was more important than his pride. It's a similar thing here. It's like helping your brother. It's the opposite. It's like getting rid of him is what's necessary. You know, that's what we need to do. If you believe your daughter, well, you got to remove this bad influence. If you believe Rhaenyra, that means Damon lied. You can't believe them both. Their stories conflict. So this guy's the one that's been the problem, the one that's been dishonest. So he's the bad influence. So he's got to go, and that it fits. It really does fit. So let's see. We talked about Rhaenyra and Kristen. A few more details here. One other thing I wanted to point out is that we're supposed to get vibes to Aerys Oakheart and Arianne and Myrcella here, where
The Soiled Knight
chapter, where Arianne seduces Aerys Oakheart in order to
Who,
get
to
him
be
to
clear-
support her in bringing Myrcella to the throne.
Yes, to be clear for our show-only viewers, Arianne Martell, Doran Martell's daughter in the books, seduces a Kingsguard knight, Aerys Oakheart, and he's not too happy about it, but he kind of, it's hard to say no.
Himself, kind of maybe like Kristen is. He kind of falls for her, and who knows if that's what's going to happen with Kristen. But in that chapter, Ari Zokart thinks about Kristen Cole.
Yes.
So don't go reread that chapter unless you want to be spoiled, because obviously there's the whole picture of Kristen Cole by that point. His whole life has happened. So
who doesn't think of Kristen Cole when they're getting busy in bed, after all? Like, let me think about the sexiest Kingsguard knight in all the land.
And like Rhaenyra, Ariane's rather convincing. He's like, this is a very difficult woman to turn down. She's rather attractive. So yeah, it's part.
Yeah,
it's
Ariane
part
does more of a traditional seduction, whereas Rhaenyra's got the like teen kid like playing, like, let me take your hat from you, like with the helmet thing. Yeah. It was very relatable. I just like shout out to like the blocking and the however they plotted out how Rhaenyra would get Kristen in bed with her.
They really emphasized her youth there.
Yeah, it was a very playful way that she did it. It was not a seduction. It was
like, look, she's just too young for that. Like she wasn't. Where did she learn all that? Like
it was more like teasing.
Yeah, it was teasing, exactly.
Playful, exactly.
Yeah, which also like plays into like, I mean, think about when it was her and Damon. Rhaenyra was trying to be a little bit of that kind of play, like when she's like trying to like kiss him back, and like she had that vibe as well, that she was playful with it.
The other really relevant power dynamic here that's a parallel is Mazaria and Damon, and how Damon used Mazaria like as a tool, but without realizing how much danger he was putting her in. He was like, I'm just going to lie about you being pregnant and all that. And she's like, that's no small lie. They could kill me for that. And same thing. He's just doing what he's doing and using people and not really considering the consequences. That's kind of what Rhaenyra has done with Kristen here, is not really consider how much danger he's put her or she's put him in.
Yeah.
Because the consequences for her will be a lot milder than just like for Damon. He stole Dragonstone and tried to usurp, and all he got was, a slap on the wrist. And Mazaria's like, yeah, you knew that's all you would get too. But for me, I could be killed. I could be killed because they want to punish you. And the same thing could happen with Kristen. So, yeah.
Yeah. Rhaenyra gets this fun night. Kristen gets guilt for the rest of his life and potential beheading.
Which may not be a very long life, or if it's the wall or something like that. Yeah. So let's talk about Mazaria, though, with that as a segue to her. Super interesting. This is a character that's been a bit changed from the books. Maybe not to this point so much, but some of how she gets to where she is a little different, which could maybe indicate more changes are to come. She has her new name, the White Worm. It's pretty fitting with her white dress, that very distinctive look she has.
Yeah.
He goes off and gets extra drunk after not being able to get it up, and it's like Mazaria's keeping track of him, but also spying on him. She keeps him from... She gives him a place to rest, but she's also reporting on him.
Yeah, so let's go into that real quick. I have some pictures to outline for you here. First of all, here, first screenshot. Okay, here, this is at the brothel. This is Rhaenyra when she leaves, and down there they pan over to this young child who then gets up and runs off. Next, we see he has come to see Otto, where he says...
Real quick.
Yeah.
I just got to say, I feel like that young boy might have done more spying in that particular spot.
Yeah, he saw a lot of stuff there. But yeah, so this young kid, we'll call him the little worm. How's that? Instead of like Varys little birds, we'll call him little
using
worms.
Using children as spies, very reminiscent of Varys.
Anyway, so this kid goes to see Otto, and that's where we get the line where he says a message from the White Worm. And of course, we hadn't heard her referred to that in World. They haven't explained why she's called that, but yes, Lady Mazaria goes by the White Worm. And then in the very next scene, we see this same kid come and bring money to Mazaria, making it very clear that the connection there. For anyone who is wondering about the how people piece that together.
So Otto is employing a spy master. Finally, we have what's been missing a bit, but like we said, it backfires. The fact that he was spying on Rhaenyra gets him kicked out. But Mazaria is untouched by that. She suffers no consequences from Otto being dismissed, except for that she no longer has someone buying her secrets. That won't last. Someone's going to pick this up. She's going to start selling these secrets to someone else. Who, I don't know, but think about the fact that Damon's been kicked out too, so it probably won't be him either. And that might be like the first person you think of, but without her around, then Who might it be?
Whoever the new hand is.
The fact that she was working with Otto was very surprising to us because in book that's not in the books at all. So we were like, oh, it makes sense, especially given it's over so quickly. But we were all like, oh, huh, how about that?
Yeah, so like you picture Damon's been gone for 3 years. Maybe it takes a year for Mazaria to be like, okay, I got to pick myself up and do my own thing. Oh, Otto is the hand. Let me make this connection. Like there's plenty of time for Mazaria and Otto to connect and for her to start feeding him information. And as Mazaria says, she realized that the skin trade was not the most profitable or best long-term trade for her to be in.
Also, Otto might have actively been looking for information or spies or whatever, too.
Yes.
So it's more likely to happen when both sides are looking for it.
But I do imagine that now that Otto is not the hand, whoever the new hand is, Mazaria will reach out and say, hey,
I'm valuable.
Yeah, exactly that. So I imagine Mazaria will have a new master, as it were, a new person that she's reporting to.
Because we're about to get a new hand, and that's whoever that will be. It makes sense that person could be the connection point here.
Do you have a thought on who the hand might be, Sean? Are there any contenders you think that Viserys might name? He's gonna call Damon back finally? Finally, he's gonna be hand.
Damon, he can be hand. Not
my best guess is Strong.
Lionel Strong.
Lionel Strong.
That's one of his good advice.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Master of Laws.
That's who I'm hoping for. I wouldn't be surprised if we get introduced to a whole new character, or if he doesn't even pick one, at least not right away. I can see it.
Yeah, given the way Lionel's behaved, he does seem like a good choice, doesn't he?
That's what he needs to do.
Yeah, make Rhaenyra
that would be if he was being if he was truly honoring his heir. Rhaenyra might be the hand because like he said, his father Balon, when he was the heir, was named hand. It's not abnormal. It's in fact very normal for them to honor and give their heir responsibilities.
And
like
Balon's namesake, Baelor Breakspear, was hand. Remember when he died in Dunk and Egg? And Balon's older brother Aemon, who was heir before Balon, was also hand until he was killed.
Realistically, if Viserys was gonna do the right thing, I think he would make Rhaenyra hand.
Yeah. Or at least eventually. Maybe not now. He's a little young, but still.
I was going to say, how old were all those other characters?
Yeah, maybe they got it at 30, not 20.
Yeah, you're right. Like, they all had kids of their own by then.
Yeah,
so they were older. Yeah, it's true. Still, though, that is maybe the track that he should consider her on. It doesn't seem like he's preparing her for handship, but we'll see.
Yeah, I like if things were going the way I wanted, she would have a seat at the table.
Yes,
even if she wasn't a named hand or master of whatever, she would still have a seat at the table, not be serving.
They definitely wouldn't be kicking her out for making suggestions like they did.
Yes.
Yeah. And see how that went too. Look at the consequences of that moment. They kicked her out to pick a Kingsguard, and she picked a Kingsguard she ended up sleeping with. So yeah, that just goes to show they should have kept her in council. That wouldn't have happened, right? If they had left her there, then Otto would have picked the political appointment Kingsguard he wanted, and backfiring again. Yes, you're right. There were plenty of backfiring examples. I missed this question from earlier from Dro the Gooner. He says Littlefinger said that chaos is a ladder. Is Damon purposely trying to start a civil war so that he can claim the throne after the dust settles after said civil war? I don't know if he's trying to start a civil war, but I do think he definitely was trying to create chaos and benefit from it. I just don't think he was able to predict very well how the chaos would go. Maybe he didn't correctly envision how much of it would blow back on him. Maybe he did plan it very well. He's not as cunning as Littlefinger, that's for sure. If
he wants to be king, then he's gonna need chaos, right? If things just go the way they normally would, he won't ever get to be king.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's actually his motivation. At least not his consistent motivation. I'm sure there's moments when he wishes he was king, but I don't know if it's like the goal of his life. You know?
Yeah, he is mercurial. I think he definitely doesn't always want what he wants on any given day. It changes. So I think that's probably pretty accurate. Another take here, a question from Stannis Baratheon says, History of Westeros and Ash, can you please talk about your evolving opinion of Damon from when you first read about him in the novellas in Fire and Blood and now the show? Yeah, he's just so much more fleshed out on the show now. I mean, he was like the description Targaryen Red Viper really said it all. Like that was like, obviously it's not specific, but that really was a very concise and accurate description of him. It doesn't really fit as well anymore. Now it's like, wow, you're missing so many angles by saying that now.
Yeah, I would say that's that was like an example of a tell, don't show kind of thing I felt that Fire and Blood did, where they kept telling me, and George kept telling us that, oh, Targaryen Red Viper, oh, he's this or oh, he's that, but I just didn't see it. It wasn't shown to me. I didn't feel it. I was never a Damon fan, personally. I know that there's a lot of people who eat from Fire and Blood. He captured their attention enough that, like, there were Damon stands long before House of the Dragon. I was not one of them. After seeing Matt Smith as Damon, there's just so much nuance and vulnerability and complexity to his character. He's got this charisma. I absolutely see it, get it, love it. Damon isn't great, but I still really like him, and I still feel for him. And they just done a really good job with Damon for me personally. Again, as someone who was pretty meh to anti-Damon going into this show, I am now more pro-Damon.
I thought he would be more like the character that drives the action and maybe not be as interesting himself. Because he just does so much. He moves things around. He creates turmoil, and that's enough for a character. But he's also just really interesting on his own. So yeah, that is, I have to agree with a lot of what Ashea said. Maybe just couch it slightly differently.
Yeah, because that was talked about a lot with Damon. We could bring up the Targaryen Red Viper thing and him being like Oberyn, and I love Oberyn Martell. And so I was like, what am I missing here that I don't get it? It was kind of like a Dark Star level miss for me, where I was like, yeah, I get that George wanted to have this sexy bad boy, but it works for Oberyn and it didn't work for Dark Star, and it didn't work for Damon for me at first, but it now works for Damon for me.
Well, one thing about Oberyn maybe that wasn't true with Damon at first was Oberyn, like, really, you could tell how much he cared about his family. His burning ambition was to avenge his sister, which is not, I mean, you could argue some of that is selfish because it's his own desire for revenge. His sister doesn't care. She's dead. But still, he's not doing it for himself, arguably, whereas Damon, pretty much everything Damon does is pretty much for himself. Before we saw the nuance of him, like, actually caring at the funeral and having doubts and things like that. So that, yeah, maybe that's part of the difference, is that he didn't have that, like, I care about other people besides myself thing, and something that Oberyn had. Yeah,
and I think there's something relatable at its core about a character who just wants to prove themselves to, like, not just prove themselves to the world, but to a specific person in their life. Like, that is far more relatable.
Yeah. Cool.
I'll say that over time, I like Oberyn less. He started off to me as this exciting, charismatic guy, but over time, kind of like Shay was saying, like he's just obsessed with revenge. And even if it's not selfish per se, he's definitely not accounting for the lives that will be lost on his quest. He might start a war, and a lot of innocent people are going to be killed. I mean, and he's too caught up in his
almost started the whole rebellion
over to think about that
because
stuff.
of that. Yeah. So yeah, he was. You're right. It was a little maybe all consuming.
And I mean, Oberyn was pretty terrible himself too. Like in the books, Oberyn has this whole thing where when he goes to collect one of his daughters, when he collects Obara, he just kind of like rips her from her mother's arms and insults the mother and takes the daughter from her, which is not a nice or relatable thing, like not a likable thing that Oberyn does. But it doesn't detract from. I really like the character of Oberyn Martell in all of his complexities, and I feel like that is reflected in Damon at last, whereas on the page in Fire and Blood, it's just a far cry difference from like hearing like 3 sentences where they say, and Damon defended his brother's right as king or whatever, and like you can just easily gloss over that. But when you make that like such like a part of his character, that he is ambitious or he wants this, but he also is bristly and prickly on behalf of his brother and cares about him, like that, it translates so much differently seeing it.
Let's talk about Damon.
Also,
go ahead.
Just real quick, I can't stop seeing the parallels between Jimmy and Chuck and Damon and
absolutely. And I mean, there's a little bit there where that is just like a pretty standard character archetype brotherly dynamic to hit.
I mean, even Oberyn and Doran
are that archetype.
The health,
literally.
The declining health, and the daughter that's kind of unsettled and with her situation and all that. Yeah, just some strong parallels there. Okay, let's talk about
one person is trying to be stable and straightforward, and one person is a wild card.
Yeah, exactly.
And we talked about
they
that.
support each other sometimes, conflict with each other other times.
And we talked about that in our interview with George when we asked him about the parallel lives thing, and he kind of just was like, "Well, no, I don't do it on purpose, but ultimately." These are true to the human experience, that there are brotherly dynamics, sibling rivalries, where one is the good. Again, and we brought it up with
power corrupting.
Yeah, or we brought it up with Rhaenyra and Alicent. And Rhaenyra calls Alicent's sister in this episode, and they have that very similar dynamic as well of the goody two shoes and the little bit of the punk wild one. Like that's it. That's them as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Damon on the outs. Despite his brother's anger towards him, it's pretty amazing. It's like how he reacts to a lot of being cornered. He just attacks. He doesn't defend. He attacks. Even with a knife at his throat, he's like, "Marry her to me. Make the House of the Dragon strong again. Make Targaryens great again." The wrinkle in this Rhaenyra's story later, she claims he didn't touch her. Damon doesn't deny having touched her, and that causes Viserys to be like, well, who's telling the truth here? It's very similar to the Heir for a Day moment when he's confronted over that. He doesn't confirm or deny the story. He just reacts to the scenario and tries to coast by or defend himself, or not defend himself, but argue that he's in the right or whatever. Similar enough. And it obviously doesn't fly. I wonder if it might have had a chance of working under other circumstances if he wasn't already married. Like if he was unmarried, could he have...
I really think that if Damon was not married, Viserys would have been okay with this.
Yeah, it's possible.
I think he would have seen that it makes a lot of political sense. Like, yeah, Otto and other people are going to be pissed off about it, but I think he would not have been opposed, but the fact that it adds in polygamy to the incest is just a step too far.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that, because I watched that scene a couple times, and I felt like Viserys wasn't really hearing Damon out. Like, I feel like Damon made good points, and Viserys would deflect. He would, bring up some different thing, And he wasn't, Damon said, hey, I gave you my crown, I dropped the sword, I bowed to you and gave you the stepstones, and you said I could have anything I want. This is what I want. Damon didn't address that promise that he made.
Well,
he's like,
you're
already married.
Illegal, though. That's...
Yeah.
But he immediately follows up. It's not really illegal. Aegon did it.
It is, but it is basically illegal, though. They've agreed not to do that. They've pretty much agreed with the faith not to do that.
And that might be true, but Viserys wouldn't address that point.
Well, he doesn't need. I don't think he needs to. Everybody knows that. Damon's. It's like, hey, why can't I have the son? It's like, of course you can't have the son.
Yeah. Shut up about the son.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he was asking for something unreasonable. I don't think you need to explain why something unreasonable is unreasonable.
But Viserys does. He doesn't say, oh, you're already married, blah 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 blah. He says she's your niece. His argument
too,
back.
Yeah.
He starts off by saying you're already married.
Okay,
and Aegon, they have a back and forth. He says you're already married. I was like, well, Aegon had a second wife, and he said, you're no Aegon, you're no conqueror. He never addresses the point that Damon makes. He brings up a different point, and Damon counters that point.
I don't think I guess what I'm saying is those counter arguments. I don't think those counter arguments were very good. Yeah. I don't think they needed to be responded to. They might not have been good. Yeah. Damon's arguments were bad. That's my point. I don't think he was very convincing. I don't think he deserved good answers, because it was the same answers he made before. It's the same. This has all been addressed before. I think it's why does Viserys need to repeat himself? He's just mad that Damon won't behave. He's like, why do you keep throwing this stuff in my face? I let you back in, and this is the first thing you do 10 minutes later.
And that's the basic point I'm making, is that he's just mad at his behavior. If he wasn't married, he would still be mad at his behavior.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying, is that even if he wasn't married, I still don't think he would let this go.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not so sure he would.
He's messing too many other things up. Yeah.
Word. Okay, so Sintisha. That's how I say it. Otto might not know the identity of the White Worm. He might not realize who he's dealing with.
Which I don't agree with that, but I thought it was worth bringing up that is all we know, is that Otto knows that there is a person called the White Worm who he is having dealings with.
And he met her on the steps at Dragonstone.
Yeah.
She was standing right by Damon, so that's a good point. Like, if he may not know who he's dealing
Yeah,
with.
he might not, like, she might just be using a pseudonym, a name, and he does not know the White Worm is Mazaria, the sex worker that was with Damon.
Yeah.
To be clear.
What was the name of the brothel?
We don't
Wasn't
actually know
given.
the name of the brothel, but it's possible that she named her brothel the White Worm. It's theoretically possible.
I had
can
in my
imagine
mind the
some
name of the
very
brothel
dirty
was the White
jokes
Worm.
about that, by the way.
I in my mind, I thought the name of the brothel was the White Worm. So when he
No,
got
it's her.
news from the White
It's
Worm,
her,
it was
yeah.
news from the brothel.
Yeah,
But
it's
her
definitely
name
It could be
is-
both, and he does not even
It
know
could
it.
be
To
both,
clear,
but it's
yeah.
definitely her.
In the books, to be clear, her nickname in the books is the White Worm because she is very pale. She's Lyseni, and so she is very white and almost albino-esque, to the point that they highlight that. Obviously, that's no longer the case in the show. They've still dressed her in these white cloaks and these long white gowns to emphasize that. So I am assuming that her name is still the White Worm. But we cannot rule out that she named her pleasure house, that she named that place the White Worm, as funny as that name would be.
It doesn't seem like a good name.
Doesn't seem like a very sexy place to go.
I wouldn't name a brothel White Worm. That seems like a bad idea. But it doesn't mean it's not possible.
Yeah.
So this leads to Otto's dismissal. This working with her, whether he knows who she is or not, leads to this scene where Viserys decides he can't trust him anymore. And this is such a good scene. He figures out Allison was pushed on her. We talked before about Otto's like seemingly genuine conflict at breaking this news to the king for a variety of reasons, which is it's difficult to see which Otto emphasized more, but they all certainly seem to matter. And that's it. He gets sent away. He takes the hand off of him, the hand pin off of him, and I thought Rhys's acting was incredible. And we'll have to see what the fallout is. Otto probably won't just vanish for good. He's still the grandfather of Aegon and Helena and father of the queen. He mentioned that his brother was the one that reported on the Sea Snake's daughter marrying the Sea Lord of Braavos. So his brother is clearly keeping track of things, and that's where he's going to be. He's going back to Old Town, where who knows, he'll be collecting information and news, and other stuff will happen. We'll see. And maybe or not, he'll come back to the story. Any thoughts on this scene? I guess we sort of talked about it a little bit ahead of time, but here's another chance if anyone wants to jump in.
I did have the thought both earlier when Otto went to Viserys, and then again when Viserys goes to Otto. They should talk to Allison. They should get her perspective. She's very tied up in this. She clearly is paying attention to what's going on, has had good advice in the past, and they keep not getting her insight, and things will probably go a lot more
Allison
smoothly
makes her insight known. Like Viserys doesn't go talk to Allison. Allison makes sure to talk to him about it. So like she made sure that they got her opinion.
Yeah,
not on Otto being fired, but on Rhaenyra and whether she actually did the thing. Like, Viserys did not. He maybe could have asked her, but no. Good on Allison. She was gung ho. She was forward about making sure to be like, no, I believe this and I don't believe that, and here's what you should do.
She really doesn't like Damon, does she? Like, consider Allison and like what she values in life, and like way she's a rules follower and like likes to keep everything peaceful and wants it all to be copacetic, wants people to get along. Damon is just like the opposite. He's constantly stirring up trouble. He doesn't have any respect for rules or
Shout
traditions.
Out to the scene where Allison is just trying to like be the great connector that she's been, and she's like, "Oh, do you want to see the new tapestries?" Yeah. And Viserys just laughs at her, like, was so disrespectful. Like she was being a good queen, and like that's like a pretty normal thing to be like, "Oh, we got some." That's like saying, like that. It's like I'm just thinking of Curb Your Enthusiasm when like Susie asks Larry if he wants to a tour of the house, and Larry's like, no, and like
I don't
it's
care
like
about
very,
that.
That's just like, Allison should.
Kind of a rhetorical question, Larry. You're supposed
to say yes, but the thing is that Damon doesn't even have a chance to say yes or no. Viserys just laughs and says, "No way, we're not doing that."
Of course, my brother doesn't want that. I know him. He hates that.
Yeah. I wanted to bring this up earlier, by the way. This seems like a good time. That in that moment, the brothers were bonding. Viserys is like, "No, you were always mom's favorite."
He was
right?
drunk.
And in this moment, right? And in this moment, when they're kind of bonding, first Rhaenyra tries to be diplomatic. Now, she's kind of in a little trouble, right? Because she came back early, but she's like, well, hey, congratulations on your victory, uncle. And Viserys is like, cold shoulder. He like literally turns away. Well, my God, he just doesn't want to engage with her.
Yeah.
And then here comes Allison with like, hey, maybe you want to check out the tapestries. Oh, silly girl. He doesn't want to see the tapestries. Even if he's right and knows Damon well enough to know he doesn't care about that, he's just not aware of these diplomatic efforts that the women are making.
Yeah. He's acting like they're teenagers again. He's time traveled back to him being like 12 and 15 or whatever, and like, my brother doesn't like tapestries, but we're tight, we know each other really well. But
I was disappointed because Rhaenyra says, oh, I want to see the tapestries, and I was like, oh, how sweet, we're gonna go see these tapestries from Norvos and Qohor. No, instead Rhaenyra and Allison just go sit down on a bench together, which was a great scene. But I would really like to see these famed tapestries.
Show us the tapestries.
By the way, that was an interesting follow-up. We got the brothers bonding and kind of ignoring the women, and then we get the sisters, quote unquote sisters.
Yeah, I mean, she calls
bonding.
her sister.
They sat down and talked. Yeah, exactly. And in that moment, they were much more aware, right? That even when Rhaenyra kind of slipped up a little bit, she realized that was kind of a slight to Allison and apologized. Realized that that was like, I'm going to say, the real diplomacy that needs to happen, right? That type of discussion is what the guys need to be doing. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Speaking of diplomacy, let's talk about a couple of leftovers from Rhaenyra and Allison becoming friends again. One thing that really sticks out there, they've found sympathy for each other again. They've found some common ground that maybe had been shaken up before, but they found their feet again on that, for now at least. Because Allison has been consistently not on her father's plan of making her son the king, she's still supporting Rhaenyra. That continues to come through with her supporting the marriage to Laenor. She's like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. You should marry Laenor. That will help your cause. If she wanted her son to become king, she wouldn't want Rhaenyra to marry the most powerful house in the realm. She would want to have her be weaker so that would help her get ahead or help her son get ahead. So she's still very much both in front and behind the scenes supporting Rhaenyra's ascent. She's like, yeah, you're the heir. That's how it should be. She doesn't really even question, even when her father's like, make Aegon king. Now, of course, that's probably not over yet. Her father's probably going to keep pushing for that. Maybe even more so now that he's been kicked out. We'll see. But so far, she's just being a good friend and being a good husband or wife.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't have any real reason to think that Rhaenyra would, like, Rhaenyra just hasn't given her any impression that she would kill her kids.
Yeah.
Like, they grew up together as best friends. It's quite a leap to suddenly decide that your best friend is willing to kill not only your children, but her siblings and be a kinslayer. Like, that is a big jump. So, like, I think she has to really believe that her kids are in danger for her to turn away from her fully.
And I think that's why she's personally so much against the Damon idea, because he would kill her kids, she thinks. Because Otto said that. And that she can't necessarily argue against. She's like, well, I know Rhaenyra wouldn't do that, but Damon might. So this is part of why she's like, he's the bad influence. Get rid of him. He's the one that's a threat. So with him in the picture, I feel like Alicent is nervous and has reason to be worried. But with him gone, maybe she can relax a little, for better or worse. She's not worried about that big, overwhelming possible problem.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's to keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer. I feel like sending Damon off to some other place, you're just asking for trouble that's far away from you and hard to deal with, or longer to see coming or whatever. I don't know.
What would you do though?
Yeah, what would
keeping
you do?
him at court, like he can't be trusted there. He can't, like, he was
He's
better.
Keep seducing your daughter if you keep him at court.
The Stepstones was better for him and the realm than being at the Red Keep. For like 2 weeks. 4 years in the Stepstones was better than 2 years in the Red Keep. 2 weeks in the Red Keep.
Maybe that's what you do. You put him in charge of some expedition. You got to find a way to make him think it's his own idea, right? If you're a good politician and a good manipulator or whatever, like send him to war, send him back to take charge of the Triarchs, or even to, I don't know, send him to take out some lord in a reach. Go settle that squabble between the Brackens and the Blackwoods.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're done,
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about lies, heart trees, tansy tea, and perception. A few bits left over here from some of these topics. Here's an important quote from Jon 2, A Clash of Kings. This is the Old Bear and Jon himself.
Jon said, "My lord father believed no man could tell a lie in front of a heart tree. The old gods know when men are lying."
My father believed the same, said the old bear.
Is this one of those gender tricks? My lord father believed no man could tell a lie in front of a heart tree. Old gods know when men are lying. But Allison, that's Rhaenyra's out. She's like, I'm not. They can't hear me. They got no idea if I'm lying.
I really do love the idea of Bran or Bloodraven or any other green seer just having a front row seat to all this drama, but like they don't get the full picture because not everything happens in front of the heart tree. So they're like, but what did she mean when she said that such and such? Like, what really happened between Damon and Rhaenyra? Like, they don't really know the truth. They only get to see the scenes that happen in this Godswood. So I was really getting having a little kick out of picturing like Bran eating popcorn while he like watches this happen.
That's hilarious. So let's see here. So that's pretty neat. The idea.
I wanted to say a cool thing about the werewood tree too. In the behind the scenes House the Dragons built featurette, they revealed that the face in the werewood is Miguel Sapochnik's mom.
Really?
No,
Yeah, that's his mother. That is the face
How'd they
in the
put her in there?
werewood. Yeah, I know. But I thought that was too cool.
Man, made that woman into a tree. Oh,
Yeah,
geez.
mother's always watching.
So even after Sapochnik leaves the show, his mother
Yeah.
will still be waiting.
Just keep
Until
that tree away
gets cut
from the
down or
white
whatever.
worm.
I don't know. Yeah. I'm still anticipating us seeing this heart tree cut down during the show. I like we said, possible it happens later during like Baelor the Blessed or during another reign, but I think it makes the most sense to see it happen in House of the Dragon because as you can imagine, probably there's going to be some fighting in the Red Keep at some point. There's going to be some reason that something like this might happen.
Patron George
Cut
the
down or
Golden
burn
One-
down?
What?
Cut down. The
Okay,
stump
cut
is
down or
there.
burn
The
down.
stump is there. Yeah, the stump is
Okay.
there, which is why I know we know
In
that
Game
it
of
has to be
Thrones.
removed.
Ned and Sansa and Arya go there to the stump, if I remember correctly, in Game of Thrones, the show.
Yeah, and Sansa hangs out there in the show as well.
So Lord,
Though I think in
our
the
patron George the Golden wanted to ask about that tree, and so we do think it's being set up for later, and we may see the cutting down of it during the show. I agree with you, Shay. There's a very good chance of that.
Yeah, and in our Saturday episode, we can talk about that a little bit more when we think that might happen.
Indeed. We do
Although
have
I
an
will
idea or
say,
two.
I think that in the book canon or maybe even in show canon, the stump, it seemed that it was an oak. It wasn't really a heart tree; it was an oak. But there was a Godswood there. To be clear, the existence of a Godswood is not new. It's just the fact that it is a actual heart tree werewood with a face.
There was no heart. There's no heart tree in the Red Keep in book canon. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's talk a little Targaryen lore here. Yeah, Targaryen lore. Damon drew her a map of the secret door. That was interesting that he apparently has all this knowledge of the Red Keep. And does anyone else? I guess Rhaenyra has been alerted to it now. She knows it exists. And I guess Kristen Cole, as we said, was as well. Will she
see the little Valyrian words as well as extra clue that Rhaenyra would have instantly known that this was Damon, in other words.
Yeah,
beyond
she's the only
any
one that
other
talks
things.
Valyrian to him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who else is writing her a Valyrian note with all this?
Talk Valyrian.
By the way,
to
do
me.
we think that Colin Robinson might have some Targaryen blood?
Ah,
Remember, he drew a same secret passage note like that too, right?
and what we do in the shadows for anyone who's like,
Yeah.
Colin Robinson, what's Sean talking about?
This episode had a lot of shadows in it. A lot of people doing things in shadows. That's for sure. So I'm curious about that. If there's going to be any more use of the passages, how that's going to come out. We definitely know of some cases where the passages will get used in the future. That's very spoiler to talk about right now, but that's still a ways away. So there's room for quite a bit of other things, or maybe setting all that up. We'll see. I'm very curious about that. Important to remember, folks. This is widely known. This isn't really a spoiler at this point. The showrunners have been open about this. That we've only got one more episode of Millie Alcock and Emily Carey and a couple of the others, I guess. And Although there was news today going around, I haven't had a chance to vet it, that they might be brought back for season 2, which means flashbacks will happen.
Oh, yeah, that's what I've been saying. I've been rooting for that. Not only because they're popular, the younger versions are popular, but it would be like they might not have had time for every monumental moment between those characters, that they might just be set up. There's a scene in season 2 where they're like, man, it would be so good if we could just show a conversation that Allison and Rhaenyra had. Let's cut back to it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would be cool. I'm super on board with it. I'm on the record.
Hey, use the heart tree for it.
I don't think I need there to be any sort of framework or reason for how it happens.
Just a memory is all it takes. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas like in general, I feel like the best opportunity for that is that there's the beginning of any given episode where you can do a prologue-y thing.
We've already had a voiceover from the very first scene.
Yeah.
Which was older Rhaenyra was narrating the Great Council.
That's
so
a
they've
good
already
point.
sort of had a little mini flashback of sorts with the Great Council scene. Wasn't really framed as now we jump forward. No, it was Rhaenyra telling that story of the past. So that framing does maybe hint at more
reflection.
Precedent established.
Precedent. Yeah, precedent. We've had flashback precedent. Yeah. So a few more family stories here. Jaehaerys and Allison and their daughters are brought up. It is 7 daughters. I couldn't remember, but I have it written here. There's Sarah was hinted at. Sarah's the one who particularly had trouble with Jaehaerys and Allison. She's the one that became queen in her own right in Volantis through rising the ranks of courtesan. There was also Viserys, who died in the Westeros equivalent of a drunk driving accident, which is racing her horse drunken through the streets and breaking her neck. Another daughter got grayscale by being a really good person, treating the sick. She was a septa. Another one died of winter fever. Another one two of them died in childbirth. One being Emma's mother, and the other being Alyssa, who was Viserys and Damon's mother.
Excuse me, I said Daella. I should be saying Daea, like
Daea.
Paella. As copyright Girls Gone Canon, who call her Daea Targaryen, like Paella.
Yep, that never gets old.
Yeah.
So Alyssa was the rider of Melis, who is Rhaenys' dragon, the queen who never was. That's her dragon. So that dragon passed from Alyssa, meaning Viserys and Damon's mother, to their sister, or their cousin, rather, who was the daughter of their father's brother. Art
on screen of Alyssa, her husband Balon, and Melis by artist J.D. Wiz.
Yeah, and their father Balon himself was the rider of Vhagar, who's been brought up a few times, and we got to figure Vhagar is going to get in the story at some point. We'll see.
Yeah.
And so lots of cool stuff there. I just love the Targaryen lore. That whenever they bring up the family mentions and just throw that stuff out there, it just makes us happy, puts the smiles on our faces, and this episode had a lot of it.
Yeah, every time that happens, we're the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme, that's us. We're like, hey.
I feel like I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah, this show has given us a lot of those moments.
But no, I really appreciated the line where, Viserys goes, Jaehaerys would have disinherited you, because he would have. Jaehaerys was a sexist and he had no patience for his daughter's exploits. And if he had some patience for it, things would have turned out a lot better for his line, I think.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons things are such a mess in his family. It's obviously not his fault that some of them died, but he could have handled some things differently. If
his daughter did go out drunk riding, basically. Like that, that just sucks for him. But he's the one who was like, I'm gonna get I'm gonna get rid of you, Sarah, for you misbehaving, when he could have tried a little harder and not done that.
Definitely. And Allison constantly disagreed with how he handled these situations.
But she's not culpable either.
You're right.
She
went along with some of it.
She went along with some of it, and more important, she went along with some of these marriages and early childbirths that she was uncomfortable with. And so, no, I don't want to, as much as we all love Allison and we call her Good Queen Allison,
she's imperfect.
She's imperfect.
There's a difference between good and perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
She's
There's
not perfect Queen Allison.
She's not perfect Queen Allison. It's a lot similar to how I picture Rhaenys, the queen who never was, how she was talking about Lena, where she's like, I'm not happy about it, but this is how it is. This is how it has to be.
Yeah. So let's talk about that real quick. Speaking of family and this notion that the Sea Lord of Braavos is going to marry Lena, that's been reported. And another great, like, important political move that's just one or two lines of dialogue. And think back to how many Sea Lords of Braavos have been a problem for Westeros in the past. This is part of why they're like, oh, we got to respond to this. And the way to do that would be to balance things out. If the Sea Lord's son marries Lena, but Laenor marries Rhaenyra, well, then they've kept parity with the Braavosi, right? It's kind of even. They each have a Valyrian marriage.
I mean, it kind of seems like it works out well because then you have a connection to the Sea Lord of Braavos yourself. Like,
that's true. Then you're all kind of.
It seems like the Braavosi might support you because that's your brother-in-law or whatever.
Technically, this marriage hasn't happened yet.
No.
So we'll see. Like, there's a chance it doesn't. Obviously, nothing's done until it's done. This is just news that it's gonna happen. And for example, we've talked about in our Stepstones episode, the Braavosi were a big part of the trouble in the Stepstones after this era, and they've been a problem for it before this era. They've had lots of connections to different people and fleets that have tried to dominate the Narrow Sea. Daenerys and Viserys, as in the original Dany in the Game of Thrones, Mother of Dragons. There's so many Dannys, you got to be clarify here. Several Viseryses too. They were guests of the Sea Lord of Braavos. That's where the Red Door was, right? And she remembers that important Red Door. And the Sea Lord of Braavos, of course, maybe was playing some games there. We're not entirely clear. He also, a different Sea Lord of Braavos, bought the dragon eggs from Alyssa Farman, gave her all the money to build her fancy ship. So yeah, the Sea Lords of Braavos very often are a political factor for Westeros, not to be looked on lightly. So that's why they were like, oh, that is a big deal, and we're meant to understand that because of this history, which is
did the
thorough.
Bank of Braavos exist at that time?
Yeah, the Iron Bank. Yes, you're right. I should mention that. Not only does the Sea Lord have a strong connection to the Iron Bank, but to the Faceless Men. So, I mean, it's not like they control them, but they have access to them in ways that other people don't, foreigners may not have. There's definitely evidence of them working in concert, even if the relationship isn't fully clear.
What
Ditto
concert?
the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men with each other.
I said, what concert?
What concert? Oh,
Beatles.
Oh.
Yeah. No, it's a Iron Butterfly again. I keep bringing them up.
Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden. Yeah, there you go.
There you go, yeah.
Something iron, yeah. Some sort of metal band, yeah. Okay, so also mentioned in this final scene, or almost final scene. The final scene is the Tansy T scene, but before that is the dagger scene, the runes on the blade, the fire etching on the dagger. I'm not sure that it advanced this plot line. It was really cool, but I don't think he revealed anything new about the prophecy. He just kind of reemphasized what her children are for. It's not just her responsibility to the throne, it's her responsibility to this prophecy. It's a big deal. And he's like, look, it's not just about your rights to the throne. We're carrying this burden here, and let me just emphasize what's going on here, how important Aegon thought this was. It wasn't just some story I told you. So it is a little bit of a rehash, but it's done really well and differently, and the writing on the blade is just so cool.
Yeah, it looks super cool. It's funny that the writing is never actually relevant later on.
No one ever knows. No one knew to hold it under the fire, which, I mean, why would you just hold your random dagger under the fire?
Someone in the chat, I don't forget who it was earlier, said, well, see, that's what they also haven't learned is that if you hold it under ice, that's another message is revealed that says property of Arya Stark. Shout out to whoever in the chat said that, because it made me laugh.
That's hilarious. They mentioned.
I can't remember if this is clear before, but another layer maybe that was added of I don't know, gravity to it or whatever, or lore to it. But this was before Aegon, right? I guess maybe Aegon had it inscribed on that blade.
Yeah, the dagger existed before Aegon. They said the dagger predated Aenar, but the etching came from Aegon.
Okay.
And what they said was he had the last of the Valyrian pyromancers do that. Now, why there were still Valyrian pyromancers 80 to 90 years after the Doom is unclear, and why they died out since is also unclear, but it's pretty cool. And I wonder about that. Maybe we'll get some more info on it. They're certainly different than the current pyromancers of Song of Ice and Fire, the ones that like Roy Dotrice was playing the pyromancer in the season 2, and Tyrion was getting all the wildfire together. There's plenty of wildfire associated with Targaryen history. Summerhall, Aerys, right? So you wonder what the connection here is, if these pyromancers learned anything from the Valyrian pyromancers, or what the difference is. I wonder if they'll explore that at all.
Both those examples you just gave are post House of the Dragon that we're watching now.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. So that shows like this is what they became, or that's always been a separate order that now is the only order, given that the Valyrian ones have died out. It's not. It's too vague for us to get too deep into it, but it's tantalizing, and I hope we get more detail.
Mm-hmm.
I almost kind of wonder the way he's framing it. He's like, look, you may not respect me. You may not respect what I'm telling you, but look, Aegon the Conqueror wrote this. Maybe you'd respect him. You know, he's maybe more formidable of a presence than I was, you know. So maybe that's what he's trying to do by saying, look, if you're not going to listen to me, listen to Aegon the Conqueror.
Somehow I don't think it'll work. It makes sense to make that appeal, but I don't think that's going to work on it.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm very curious to see how she handles it. I mean,
like, even if maybe she wanted to, this is like another thought I had about Damon. There's just something in him, and maybe in her too, some sort of compulsion, or some, you know, like, even if she in that moment was like, really, that's what Aegon wanted? It seems like I'm being sarcastic to say that, but what if she genuinely had that thought? Oh, I didn't realize. You're right. I should follow what Aegon said. But 3 days later, when she's crushing over Kristen Cole, that's out the window. You know what I mean?
Yep. Like, that's funny. Okay, so a question from Lucas Parham. He says, do you think Mushroom will appear on the show? I don't know. I think we might get him on, like sitting in a corner or something.
There is a preview image from, again, if you tune in on Saturday, we'll talk about this more. There was a dwarf in the preview for next week. I don't think that was Mushroom personally, but maybe. So we'll talk about it a little bit. This is just a little bit too much on the spoilery topic, Lucas, but perhaps that was a version of Mushroom.
And Ryan Condal interviewed him, was sort of cagey. He was like, he sort of said yes, but didn't commit. He was like, keep watching. He was like, we're like, as if there's going to be something, maybe not exactly Mushroom, but something that resembles Mushroom.
That's which is my thought, that again, if in the preview we see a dwarf performer, we can be like, okay, that's our Mushroom stand-in. We don't have to see him on screen all the time to be like, that guy was watching sometimes and making up stories.
Speaking of side characters here, we talked about how it's Willem Blackwood and not Samwell Blackwood. Maybe that's because we already have so many other Samwells. There's Samwell Spotify, who's her bard.
Which is,
right?
but see, like, but that's where like it's weird to me, because they made the choice to make.
No,
make
I know, I'm just joking.
I know you're just joking about that, but for what it's worth, if they did change Samwell's name to Willem because of that, like, that's a weird change to me. So I'm personally rooting that Samwell Blackwood still exists and that Willem is Sam's brother and Ben's uncle. I'm still
there are other Samwells too. There's a Sam Strong as well. I'm not saying that's why they changed it, but you know, there are a bunch of Samwells.
Yeah. So we will see about that. I will definitely be on Blackwood watch going forward to find out exactly what the family dynamics are here.
Yeah. Myth Sixth Sense says, I'm a new subscriber and late. Anyone notice the birth control tea Allison was drinking before bed?
So
I considered that, but I don't think it was.
I don't think it was. There's two things. One, she's drinking it before she even sleeps with Viserys that night, before she even knows that she's being summoned to see him.
I thought it was like a sleeping draught.
Yeah, I think it was, like a tea with some alcohol or some stuff. I think it was showing that she was getting ready for bed.
Especially because Melas says it has to be done just right.
Yeah, and
or
she
it
was
could
brewing,
backfire.
like, it was just like there.
She wouldn't be making it herself.
Yeah. So I would say I feel strongly that she was not drinking any sort of birth control.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think that she could do that in the future, or that that's outside the realm of her character.
Also, don't think it fits her. Yeah, I think she just follows the rules. I don't think she would do that. I think that goes against her duty to her husband. And even if she wants to do that, I don't think she would. But
and I think it shows a contrast in like the amount of control that they have over their life. Like I think between when you compare Alicent and Rhaenyra and Mazaria, the idea that maybe be Allison. If it was up to her, she wouldn't be just popping out kids year after year.
Yeah.
She would use birth control, but she does not have that option. Like, I think that makes more sense and is more significant and thematically resonant and all that, which I sometimes I harp on that, but like I do feel like theories get lost in the weeds sometimes with, well, could this happen? Is this possible? And not, what is the meaning to this? What does this mean for the story? Because I just want to caution y'all to just think about that sometimes.
Yeah, well said. All right, a couple of miscellaneous things that we didn't talk about. For example, I was wondering if there was any symbolism. I couldn't figure it out, but I wondered why there were rats crawling around Balerian's skull when she walked by. I was like, what's that about?
It's all the rats crawling around the dragons, you know.
There was also, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay. There was also a rat above Alicent's bed. Do you remember that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. After Viserys had fallen asleep and she was laying in bed next to him, she's looking up and like the bed frame or whatever had a rat crawling above it. I also noticed, I think there was at least one other scene where they kind of featured rats scurrying around. And I kind of put it into maybe the same line of like, you remember when Viserys told Damon that he's a plague trying to ruin me? I wonder if it's just another ending. And we saw the sores on him, just that he's infested. The keep is infested. The family's infested with rats, plague, whatever it is.
See it as that. I will point out, as many people have also pointed out, the Maesters are referred to as gray rats, as rats in A Song of Ice and Fire. I do think that it's much more so what you're saying, Sean, that it's a general plague and infestation versus specifically about the Maesters. I don't think that it's going that far.
I agree. I think it may also be just very simple in that it sets up perhaps that they will hire some rat catchers, which that, if you know Fire and Blood, you know why that's relevant. If you don't, you'll see.
Yeah.
And there aren't rat catchers in King's Landing anymore. You'll notice that in the time of Arya, who explores the tunnels, all the rat catchers have been replaced with cats.
So it will be a plot
rat
point.
catchers or maybe more spies that are brought in.
You're on the right track. People walking around those secret passageways, you got to give them access to places where the rats would be, and maybe that's a problem.
Yeah,
yes.
So I would say I think that it is setting that up. As funny as that does seem, like let's set up the rat
It occurred to me
catchers,
just now. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I do think that it's that. I was trying to delicately avoid it, but sure, it's not spoilery to say that.
Yeah.
We'll see more characters.
It's one of those things that if you have read, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, you're like, what the hell's he talking about? So that's, something to tease. Yay. All right. We can walk that tightrope of not spoiling while also nodding to people who know. More on that Saturday, I suppose we can talk about. Love the spoken High Valyrian, as we said, and the written High Valyrian on the dagger. We were told there would be a good
dagger
and
the map.
You're right, the map.
Yeah.
Good call. Yeah.
True.
So David J. Peterson, who created the language, did tease that there would be a good amount of written and spoken High Valyrian in the show, and we're seeing that. There's surely more to come, but that is awesome. Every time we see it, it makes us a little bit happier. Is she still reading Nymeria's book? Again, she's seen reading a book.
Yeah, because that's my question. Is Rhaenyra a slow reader, or does she like to reread? Does Rhaenyra subscribe to Valar rereadus? Because that's what I think. I think she's just rereading it.
That's really why you keep picking Millie Alcock each week.
Yeah,
she's
a reader.
She's the avatar of Valar rereadus.
I will say that I do like Rhaenyra a whole lot more, knowing that like she likes to read, she likes to listen to music, she likes to go out and get drunk and party a little. Like Rhaenyra is a cool, relatable character. This is exactly what they need to do when fleshing out Fire and Blood characters.
Shout out to Kim Renfro, who will be our guest one of these weeks. I forget when.
Yeah, I forget if it's like 9 or 10, a few weeks, many weeks from now.
And she said, I too, as a kid, like to reread my favorite book with my favorite song playing on repeat. In reference to the song over and over. And,
super relatable.
One part I missed about that, with that song, him playing the song over and over, is when she's like, yeah, play it again. He stretches his hand for a second, like he's been doing it all day. I was like, that's a good little clue.
Yeah, like beyond him just being sick of the same song, like as a musician, you can relate more. Is the idea of just the same notes over and over.
Like, can I please play something else?
Just one other song to just stretch my fingers out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm gonna really know the song well. At least this is kind of like practice, not performance. So yeah, I do wonder about that, whether that's the what's going on with the book. Nancy Groth says, also in the episode, Rhaenyra had way better sex than Allison during her maiden voyage. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there probably was an element, like, yeah, Allison was, like, aghast and offended and appalled and all that, but I do think there's an element within Allison that is also, like, oh, that, like, your life sounds nicer than mine, starting off with the first thing of Rhaenyra having all these young suitors and that Allison was taken by. So, like, yeah, I do think there's some envy, some jealousy there. Yeah, mostly she's appalled.
It was a very nice moment because she's like, she says, they're not interested in me. They just want my Valyrian blood and birthright. And she's like, I think it's romantic. Yeah, she's joking, but she's playing it off. But you're right. There's an element of, that's better. Like I had to get married. I didn't have suitors.
I didn't have anyone. Yeah, exactly. I had to seduce this older man, and for his Valyrian blood and birthright, I'm gonna tell myself that's romantic.
yeah, right.
No, poor thing. Speaking of those suitors, we do see some notable houses because we see like House Frey, we see Tully, we see those Brackens.
Can you pull this image up here?
I will pull the image up in one.
Shout out to Gray Area and Direwolf City. They're going on after us as they always do on Mondays at 8:30 Eastern. So you can always just click right on over to them when we're done here. Gray Area took a shot here from the cattle show, and it is a showing of different suitors here. We've got mostly Riverlanders. In fact, possibly all Riverlanders in this shot. It looks like a Strong. I'm not sure who that Strong is. It might be the Sam Strong that we're talking about. There's a Tully in there. There's a what might be House Mud, which is odd because in book canon House Mud's extinct, but it really looks like House Mud.
My argument is that I know that there's this mostly Riverlands people that we're seeing right there, but we also see like a brown-skinned guy and like a black woman. So like maybe there's some other regions. Like maybe there are some Dornish suitors. Maybe it's a House Man.
I'm super dubious there's Dornish suitors in this room because they're independent and the Stormland. Like why would they be able to gather?
I agree with you there. I again am just looking at the fact that like there are like. There just were there's like a
but those don't have to be Dornish.
Guy.
I mean, they can be like obviously they could come from other places.
To the same, but I mean also like to the same place that like Kristen is Dornish as well in the Stormlander. Like it's there's not
right, but he's not representing a Dornish house.
He's not representing a Dornish house. But my point is just that like that could be the case there.
Yeah, I don't.
There might be people there with Dornish blood that aren't supporting a Dornish house.
Yeah,
right. Exactly. But they wouldn't just that wouldn't explain this guy, this House
or Valyrian blood.
Yeah. I don't think there are any other Valyrian blooded people that should be around. I mean, they could obviously have added something, but because if this is House Mud, that was
Valyrian.
I know that's what you meant.
Clearly, but
yeah, either way.
You think Corliss's family is the only one?
Yes, they're the only ones. Yeah.
Well.
Well, there's House Celtigar, which is Valyrian as well, but this isn't where that would happen. I don't think they would have. Anyway, it's all speculation at this point.
But I mean,
that's why I think
I don't necessarily think that black woman is related to Corlys Velaryon, though. I think they're showing.
I agree.
I think they're saying that there are other houses that have like. I think that's just what they're adding in.
I agree, which is why I don't think it's Dornish. I think they just are adding the diversity without necessarily specifying where it comes from. And it doesn't have to be Dornish. And there's pretty good reason to think the Dornish wouldn't be welcome. Anyway, we don't know, but we might learn later. And if so, we will fill you all in. Either way, this House Mud guy looks like a terrible.
To continue, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Either way, this House Mud guy looks like a terrible candidate. He's at least as old as the Dondarrion she laughed at. So maybe that's why he's like, "You're really old. You actually predate the extinction of House Mud." This guy's like 500 years old. Yeah, look at this dude. Look at these dudes chuckling, like, "Oh!" They're like snickering at the Bracken guy's insults.
Yeah,
they weren't laughing after
that. This guy's so funny.
Yeah. His last laugh. He did not have the last laugh.
And that also looks like clearly the father, as you can see, because he rushes over to Geralt after his
Oh, is that a bracken? Is that a necklace? Or
Yeah,
is that a
yeah,
horse
that's his necklace. Yeah, and then you see later, as you can see right here, then when he's dead, he's very upset by this, and they just look related beyond that. So I'm gonna guess that's his father. It's of course also possible it's an older brother or an uncle, as always. But I'm gonna guess that is Gerald Bracken's Bracken father.
We will keep an eye on them to see if the characters remain consistent. Like if this particular actor shows up again, we'll be able to draw more conclusions based on that. Okay, let's wrap it up. Remember, folks, to check out the synopsis each week. It helps you get primed for the episodes and the discussions that ensue. Also, check out our Dance of the Dragons coverage with Radio Westeros if you want to get deep into the book lore. We got 4 episodes out of a planned 7. Episode 5 is fairly imminent as well. We get a lot farther down the timeline in that one, and it also helps you keep track of the difference between book and show canon, and it's just fun, if I do say so myself. Final thoughts, Sean?
There was one little bit that I wanted to get back to. I mentioned in the beginning that through the course of this episode, Rhaenyra did several troublesome things, one of which was in that, when they're going through the city streets, and she's like, I don't care what the people think.
Yeah,
like, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's the best thing we want to hear a future ruler saying.
Yeah.
Even Damon was like even if he doesn't actually care about them, he knows you need to account for it. If nothing else,
it matters.
And,
he's right that it matters.
Yeah, and I wonder on like a slightly bigger picture with all the context of this, if she seems to be, to me so far, mostly being presented as if not the protagonist, and maybe she's going to get screwed over this inheritance that she should get. But maybe she shouldn't get it. Like if like maybe by the rules of this land and the inheritance laws, you should. But those are all bad rules in the first place. You shouldn't be just because of who your dad was, right? So, and if you want to pick the ruler based on how good a ruler they're going to be, even aside from her being too young for this, really, she still might get it. If Viserys dies tomorrow, she's going to become the queen, and even if the whole land had accepted it, she might not be that good, and hopefully she has a good counsel around her. She won't be doing it on her own, but she doesn't really have the right mentality for it, at least not right now.
Yeah, she needs more education. I totally agree. If she were to take over as queen tomorrow, probably wouldn't go very well. She's definitely not ready for it. She hasn't been well prepared for it, as we pointed out multiple times. Viserys is not really putting her in that role to learn very well. He's been trying to find her a husband. That seems what he's more focused on, getting her married, than he is teaching her how to rule well. And of course, part of that is he doesn't know how to rule well, so he's not. Yeah, there isn't a lot of expertise in general. Yeah, you're right, and the legacy.
Yeah, he's more worried about the legacy,
prophecy,
both of like his family, his heir, the prophecy. Not that he isn't worried about the people, but it doesn't seem to be his primary consideration, which I think it should be the ruler's primary consideration, and it's certainly not Rhaenyra's primary consideration. Daemon at least recognizes that it needs to be a consideration, even if it probably wouldn't be his primary one. It is neat to think about, what if he did suddenly become king? How would he handle it? Would he shift gears as a person? I don't know. I didn't mean to get into that, but I do want to say that I'm reevaluating my perspective of what Rhaenyra's role is, where this might go if I want her to win or whatever.
Right on. Yeah, and that's great because it's not straightforward. It's not obvious, and you can see it going a lot of different ways, and that's part of what makes it so much fun, so discussion worthy. And we're just so excited to see what else comes. It feels like there's been so much. We're not even halfway there yet with the season, let alone the whole run of the show. We got so much more to go, so take heart in that. So much more fun is heading our way. Any final thoughts for you, Shay?
Oh, I wanted to highlight Liet Rubenfeld, who does point out that in the books, a Dornish marriage is suggested, at least, to bring Dorne into the realm. That doesn't take away from your point that the Dornish being there at Storm's End, where they have a traditional rivalry, is weird.
That's the part I have the most problem with.
I wanted to be clear, but I also wanted to bring up, since we brought up the Dornish connection, that that was brought up.
It may have been the part she skipped, right? She skipped 2 months of the tour. Maybe she was supposed to go farther south.
Yeah.
That would have taken her Dorne. That would be the next stop south.
Damn, Rhaenyra, if you had just gone to Dorne, you would have found all the sexy bad boys you wanted.
Yeah, there's plenty of Kristen Coles down there.
Plenty of Kristen Coles.
Who aren't
we know
Kingsguard.
your type. Yeah.
It's also possible they weren't actually at Storm's End, right? Especially if you said everyone there was
they were at
Riverland.
Storm's End for 2 reasons. It's very clear, because one, behind Rhaenyra, we see a stag on one of the walls.
It's Lord Baratheon sitting next to her.
It's Lord
too.
Baratheon sitting next to her, and it's specifically they made it windy because it's Storm's End, where it's supposed to be windy there in general in the Storm lands. So, but yes, it's clear for a few reasons.
Yeah. And the Riverlands is lower in prestige at this point. Remember, they were a conquered realm of the Iron Islands when Aegon conquered Westeros and then redivided it and appointed supreme power to the Tullys and the Riverlands, who had never been kings or been supreme before. And he did that in order to keep them from having a rallying point. But just like appointing the Tyrells in charge of the Reach.
But in the books, this did take place in the Riverlands. Yeah. Despite that, this is where the Bracken, it was the duel between Samwell Blackwood and Amos Bracken, and that happened in the Riverlands as part of her tour that she did. So they just cut that down.
Yeah, they kind of mashed up a little bit of it there. It makes sense. All right, that's it. Any other final comments?
No, I am good. Right. Except I hope y'all tune in on Saturday for spoilery chat.
Who's our guest this Saturday?
Who is our guest this Saturday?
I meant to make a note. I have lost track. We have such a robust schedule. In the meantime, thank you all who came live for submitting your questions and adding a lot of great chat to our comment section. A lot of y'all noticed some really useful things that we wouldn't have put into the episode without you. Sean?
Follow me on Twitter.
Follow Sean on Twitter. At Dancing
But don't
YouTube
spoil
also.
Sean on Twitter.
Yeah, don't tell him anything that's out. Remember, he is unsullied at this point. Let's keep it that way.
Not for after the show, but for the rest of the season of the show, he is.
Yeah.
Oh, our guests this Saturday is Direwolf City. We're having Alicia and Ara of Direwolf City, so that plays in perfectly to our plug to starting in 2 minutes is Direwolf City going live. I'll grab a link for y'all.
Yeah. Also, thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our maps and usual video intro. Our new video intro, thanks to Bran Winslow, Bran the Builder. Thanks to Patreon subscribers, members, and those of you who subscribe on Spotify. That's a relatively new feature. Gives you similar benefits to signing up to Patreon, but you may prefer the convenience, if you already have a Spotify subscription, just adding that on. And don't forget to come back on Saturday, like Ashaya said, for our spoiler-filled version. Like she said, we'll have Direwolf City as our guests. We'll get into what's happening next episode, looking at the trailer. There's more to predict than usual because the time jump will happen after episode 5. There's a lot of things that kind of have to happen in the next episode based on what we expect. We'll see if that actually happens. So there should be plenty to say. It should be really fun. The trailer looks pretty interesting. A lot of those scenes that are going to happen in episode 5 were broadcast part of the original trailer.
Yeah. This is a big wedding scene. So, but we won't talk about it because some of you avoid the previews and all that, so we won't talk about it much. But as you know, the wedding is going to happen. So big episode.
That is one quick thought I wanted to make was that the fact that they have set a precedent of these big time jumps makes it a little harder to predict what's going to happen next episode.
Yeah.
You know, like, are we going to resolve a storyline which just now happened or go a year forward and see how that has bloomed or been set aside or whatever? So anyway,
I had a funny observation about the cut wedding scene. If y'all didn't know, there was a cut scene from Allison's marriage to Viserys that was filmed, and they didn't use it. It would have been in episode 2, and if you look at the episode lengths, episode 1 is just over an hour, episode 3 is just over an hour, episode 4 is just over an hour, episode 2 is 52 minutes, so it's almost like you can tell that a scene was cut, that they planned it to be just as long as the others, but they couldn't fit it in because it didn't fit the time jump. It would have been before the time jump, and they're like, well, this is the only scene before the time jump. But it would have had like Rhaenyra and Alicent arguing, and it would have really framed Alicent or Rhaenyra helping, or the other way around when they're helping each other get dressed and all that. So, yeah, that would have been. We'll probably get that as a deleted scene.
Yeah, I think we will. Like I said, it's not one of those scenes that needs a bunch of visual effects work done. Like they have it.
Yeah,
here's a nice little look at Alicent's dress.
It got farther along the process than you would expect for a scene that would end up getting deleted. It was like they didn't. It's like they really waited till the last minute to cut it. They really didn't want to cut it, but they're like, we just have to.
Sometimes it just doesn't work on the editing floor, even if they have the time for it. They're like, it's just slowing things down, or it's doing whatever. I would love to see the scene though, so I have a feeling that we will get it in deleted scenes. But considering that they haven't like kept the information on lockdown, they're just like freely advertising
they just
it
let
existence.
the director just like broadcast the dress and all the photos.
Yeah,
this is what we
exactly.
would have
So,
had.
like,
You know, like,
it
not a review.
It wasn't
it's not
cut
like,
for being bad.
Yeah,
or for being
it's not
poorly
spoilery.
done.
Like we know they get married. You know, maybe
Yeah.
A lot of editing is done for flow reasons, time constraints. Like they want to keep the flow going if it's not going to be part of the time jump, but they don't want to make the second episode an hour and 20 minutes. You can do that for the finale maybe, but yeah,
that's a good point. Speaking of flow, I interrupted our outro with that anecdote, but hey, y'all have come to expect that from us. We got to say what we got to say. It's got to be said when it's got to be said. And that's how it works out. Until next time, folks, thank you for coming. We're so excited to be going through the season with you all. We'll see you Saturday, a lot of y'all, or Monday, a lot more of y'all. Until next time, Valar reread us and Valar rewatch us.